What basic, kid-level fact blew your mind as an adult? I lived in a desert for most of my life. No snow, and before my recent experience, I'd spent maybe a total of 5 days of my life in snow, and the snow I was in was incredibly light. Because of this, I always pictured snow as eternally white and ethereal, like in all of the cartoons that I'd watched as a kid. I went to spend time with my partner's family back in the Midwest in early February. I was absolutely enchanted on my first day of the 2-week stint. And then I watched what happened as the snow stayed around, and I got to see black ice and the nasty grey-brown snow blocks on the side of the road. I suppose I should have known snow got dirty and tracked over and nasty, but I didn't. It robbed the childhood wonder and whimsy right from under my nose. I was baking a cake in my dorm for my 19th birthday. My friends were running around and being loud, so I yelled at them to stop because I didn't want them to ruin the cake. They looked at me like I had 2 heads, so I had to explain that my siblings and I were always taught that making loud noises or running around a kitchen when something was baking would make it fall. I was surprised that they'd never learned that baking rule. Yeah, it turns out that was made up to stop kids from running and being loud for a couple of hours when the baking was being done. I called my mum up to ask her about it, and both she and my grandma were just as shocked as I was to find out it was a myth. So apparently at least 3 generations have believed and followed that rule. My mother used to feed me dark green lettuce as a salad. I loved it when I was a kid. I think I was 17 and I had a friend over for dinner and asked my mum for seconds of dark green lettuce. My friend looked at me like I'm a frickin' idiot. Do you mean that's spinach? What the F? Mums had been fooling me my whole life. In college, my buddy asked me how to spell smorning because his phone didn't recognize it as a word. And then he goes on to say, like the smorning. I ask, do you mean this morning? One day, I had a light bulb moment. Pickling is a process. You can pickle anything. So what are pickles? I was going to blow so many minds with my question. Turns out it's cucumbers. And everyone on the planet knew that except me. One of the unanswered questions of the universe is why cucumbers are special. You've got pickled eggs, pickled herring, pickled pig's feet, but when you pickle cucumbers, you get pickles, not pickled cucumbers. Why? The answer might well be that pickled cucumbers are the only one of those things actually worth eating. Look, the others served their purpose in the pre-refrigerator days, but I'm going to risk the wrath of our English viewers and just say that pickled eggs have no redeeming qualities as a food. Why would you eat them when you have those amazing cold pork pie things in your pubs? I thought robins, like the birds, came out of hibernation at Christmas time because that's when you see them on cards and stuff in the UK. I didn't realize for a very long time that you in fact see them all the time, like normal birds. Not me, but my father once stole into the woods during a family camping trip and put marshmallows on a bush so it looked like they grew on it. My sister made it to post-secondary horticulture before she wised up. I always thought the term "the coast is clear" was "the ghost is clear," like as in transparent. My great-grandfather had half a pinky on his left hand and always said it was because he liked to use it to sop up leftover pancake syrup and had worn it down to a nub. This made sense to me because I'd seen him do that plenty of times. I was so embarrassed to be in college before I realized that was ridiculous and finally asked him what really happened. In reality, he and my uncle had been working in their blacksmith shop, and my uncle accidentally brought a sledgehammer down on Granddad's pinky. He just didn't want to traumatize me with the truth as a kid, but by the time I asked, I was more than old enough to handle it. As a kid, I used to think the black market was an actual place like a bazaar where all the criminals would regularly meet up. When I was 4 or 5, my mother had bought me a balloon one day. Plain blue balloon with helium. I accidentally let it go and it flew away. Being little, I was devastated. Later that night, she comes back from somewhere and tells me she was at the gas station and miraculously, my balloon just came floating by. Being a kid, I was thrilled and I totally believed it. So fast forward 20 plus years, I'm on a date and we stop to get gas and we see a balloon floating by the gas station. I probably hadn't thought of that story again in all that time. So I start telling my date the story of how I had a balloon fly away and then my mother found the very same balloon at a gas station, and then as I'm saying it out loud I realize, too late to not look like an idiot, that of course it wasn't the same frickin' balloon. I've never seen someone laugh so hard. I didn't realize the handicap sign was a person in a wheelchair for a long time. I'd always thought it was just a neat little symbol, kind of like a treble clef. I truly believed that for the longest time that hair grew from the ends of the strands, not from the scalp. When I was 13, I asked my friend who had dyed her hair what she was going to do when the ends grew her natural color. I did not hear the end of that. My stupidity still pains me to this day. I learned after the 2016 election that Alaska is not in fact an island with a weirdly straight border. That's just how it looks on the electoral map. For years, I'd been removing toast from the toaster by sticking a butter knife in it and picking it out. It wasn't until I was 20 that my girlfriend freaked out when I started doing it, and I learned that metal in the toaster is bad. I guess I'd been pretty lucky. I thought until about the age of 21 that when companies had "est" next to their name, it was estimated that companies were started around that year. It was only when I voiced my disgust profoundly to my then partner that it was ridiculous that nobody knew when these companies were formed, and why were they all estimated, that she just stared at me blankly for a moment and said, "Established." The penny dropped real hard just then. I was 23 when I learned I was allergic to apples. Somebody was complaining about their throat closing up after smoking, and I responded with, "Oh yeah, like when you eat an apple?" You can imagine how the conversation went from there. A friend of mine learned he was allergic to bananas when his mum asked why he didn't want one, and he just said he wasn't in the mood for a spicy fruit. We were at least teenagers. That little thing that dangles at the back of your throat isn't your tonsils. Depends on what you consider a child fact, I suppose, but in my mid-20s I moved up the food chain from server to bartender at the restaurant I worked at. Someone ordered a Roman Coke. I didn't know what was in a Roman Coke, so I told him so, but that I'd figure it out. I figured out that what I'd been understanding as a Roman Coke my whole drinking life was in fact a rum and Coke, and that I knew how to make that. I didn't learn that Martin Luther and Martin Luther King Jr. weren't the same person until college. I'm from Pennsylvania. When they do the nightly lottery drawings on TV, they always add a reminder at the end. Benefits older Pennsylvanians every day. So naturally, I just assumed that a lot of elderly people won the lottery. When I was a teen, I made a joke to my dad about him turning 50 and having a better shot at winning the lottery, and he looked at me like I was nuts. Turns out that benefits older Pennsylvanians every day means the lottery is a fundraiser for senior services, and here I was thinking that it meant Grandma was winning millions on her scratch-offs. I'm like 70% sure that there are a lot of people who might have drawn the same conclusion as you about their state or country lotteries. And I've just honestly never thought about it, but I think given that more old people play those things, as far as I know, it's one of those ideas that I might have also come around to if I was left to my own devices. My mum used to tell me the car doesn't start if the seatbelts aren't buckled. Didn't know that wasn't a real feature until I was 22. My 31-year-old girlfriend thought islands don't touch the bottom of the ocean. I can confirm this is a thing. I was a kayak, surf, and snorkel guide in Hawaii, and a staggering amount of people asked me how long it would take to swim under the island. Don't add dish soap to the dishwasher. I found out that one at 26. I swear it's only because I grew up washing dishes by hand. I had a fun time cleaning that mistake. Space heaters are so named because they heat a room, a space, and not because they look like futuristic devices from outer space. I went to Lowe's and I asked in front of everyone for a strap, hold for demonetization, on. The correct word I was looking for was ratchets and tie-downs. It took me an embarrassingly long time before I realized that when a movie had a blurb from Rolling Stone, it wasn't the Rolling Stones reviewing it. I spent well into my teen years thinking it's cool how the Rolling Stones are so influential in music that they have a whole magazine reviewing stuff. Like, I really thought Mick Jagger was just giving his opinion on stuff. My cousin's name. Growing up, we'd always called her Tori, always that and nothing else. A couple of years ago, well into my 20s, she's visiting and we go to a restaurant. Our waitress comes up and says, "Hi there, my name's Victoria and I'll be taking care of you." And my cousin says, "Oh neat, that's my name too." And I was surprised by that because my dumb self never put together that Tori was short for Victoria. I thought the former leader of North Korea was Kim Jong-II for an embarrassingly long time. I somehow managed to avoid hearing his name said out loud, or written in serif font apparently. They're doing much better now that they're led by Kim Jong from the UN. My mother told me that if you swallowed gum, it would stick to your ribs. I was in my second year of college in an anatomy class when it hit me that this wasn't true. My roommate was 21 when he learned that cows have hair. He thought they were just skin, or that we just, peeled the leather straight off them. I incorrectly said the bryst of it instead of the gist of it. I used that phrase in conversation for years, until when I was nearly 30 I got corrected by a Jehovah's Witness that came to my door and asked me if I ever read the Bible. I smugly replied I got the bryst of it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. That reindeer are a real animal. When I found out about Father Christmas, I thought that meant reindeer weren't real either. I was very much an adult when I was very confused and excited to see one in real life. In college, I had a tough time trying to convince a friend that yellow dandelion flowers were the same as the white puffballs. I had to find a plant that had both stages coming from the same base. That woodchucks and groundhogs are the same animal. I was somewhere in my 30s. My state called them woodchucks, so I never made the connection when I was younger. I thought an axolotl was a fantasy creature that didn't exist. I mean, you can't blame me, just look up a picture of one and tell me that doesn't look straight out of some fantasy movie. I was only able to see the capital D in the Disney logo a few months ago. I always wondered why it was a backwards G. I'm 29 years old, it wasn't my brightest moment. I always thought the Y was a P, like Disnep. I thought it was some fancy French spelling. I was in my mid-20s when I casually mentioned it to my brother and he nearly choked laughing. At age 22, I learned that kiwis aren't supposed to taste spicy. Turns out I'm just allergic. I thought for the longest time that's why people liked them. When I was young, I found a Doobie Brothers CD at a relative's. I asked my mum what a doobie is, and she said it's a lady's private part and to never say it. I was 17 before I saw someone call a sweet roll of Mary J a doobie. I found out that jackalopes are not real and a creation from taxidermists and other folklore. I was absolutely mind-blown and Scooby-Doo betrayed my younger mind. There's no chemical in the pool that reveals pee. A buddy and I were talking about it and we both realized at the same time that neither of us have actually seen it. We looked it up and felt as dumb as hell. The Adam Sandler movie Grown Ups, or maybe its sequel, uses this premise as a gag. I like to think that will help keep this myth alive for another generation. I was a lifeguard for many years and we absolutely told the kids that pee-revealing chemical is real. My granddad played this epic decades-long practical joke on me. Every Christmas, for as long as I remember, he'd put on Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, only the first disc, and said it was a Christmas tradition. Every year, without fail, he'd put the CD on regardless of if we were at his house or if he came to us that year. It was only at Christmas 2020, when I had my first Christmas without seeing any family due to COVID, that I asked my housemate, "Do you want me to stick on the War of the Worlds now or later?" My housemate looked at me perplexed. "What?" "You know, War of the Worlds. My granddad insisted it was a tradition." Only your granddad does that. I told him over video call on Boxing Day, and I have never seen the old man laugh so hard. I mean, it is funny, but I've got to say that it sounds like he actually did turn it into a real tradition in the family. This happened every year on Christmas for, 2 decades? My family have been doing Love Actually for that long, and I'm pretty sure that it counts as a tradition if there have been new generations born into it. Okay, so I grew up on a small farm. We had cows, chickens, pigs, rabbits, and goats, and more. On occasion, we had to shear the goats, and the goats would hold very still when being sheared, like statue still. I saw this on pretty regular occasions. When my parents would take me to get a haircut, they'd tell the barber to give me a billy goat cut. Of course, to me, this meant hold really still, so I did. I had the same barber for a long time. Eventually, he passed when I was in high school, leaving it up to me to find a new barber. Imagine mine and my new barber's surprise when he said, "How do you want it cut?" And I just said I want a normal billy goat cut. This is one of those things that makes me cringe at night. A friend of mine had a mum that would make sure there was an inch of room for his feet to grow whenever he got new shoes as a kid. He was in his 20s and trying on new shoes and asked the salesperson if there was room at the tip. They looked at him like he had a Johnson growing out of his forehead and said, "You don't need room, you're done growing." Oof. I'm from a northern city in the US. In basic training for the army, I was asked by the chow hall lady if I wanted grits with my eggs and bacon at breakfast. I'd literally never seen or heard of them in my life. I lived a relatively sheltered and somewhat ethnic-focused dietary life. I asked her what grits were, and she replied, well, they're just grits. So asked, as politely as I could, are they an animal, mineral, or vegetable? Luckily, my new friend from Florida was behind me, heard the entire conversation, and said to me, they're corn, somewhere between cream corn and cornmeal. He then said, if you put butter and salt on them, they taste like butter and salt. I loved that guy. He's probably a general now. My grandma always made me eat the crust on my bread because it has the most nutrients. In college, when I told my younger cousin that in front of my grandma, she laughed and said, oh, I only told you that so you wouldn't waste the crust. Similarly, that if you turn the lights on and off too fast, you'll start a fire. Once I became a parent, I realized it's just a way of stopping kids from being annoying. Once when I was 17, I was losing my mind trying to find cupcake mix in the baking aisle, only to then have the epiphany that cupcakes are just, well, small cakes. That a pony is not a baby horse. I'm 47 and I learned that less than a decade ago. I had to tell my aunt, who's age 60, that cats and dogs can't interbreed and create some sort of hybrid cat dog. She didn't believe me at first, so I had to tell her that there would be a lot of half people, half sheep running around in our country if that were the case. One of my mates from my master's at grad school didn't know that there were male and female chickens. He thought roosters and hens were different breeds. The same went for cows. He justifies hating cheese because he thought cow milk was cow urine. We had to explain to him that pee is not stored in the udders and also asked him what he thought happened when human mothers fed their newborns. Pee is not stored in the chest, mate. We were 24 at the time. Tim, if you're reading this, you were way smarter than me at neuro-ophthalmology. I had my CPA license before I realized pickles are actually cucumbers. Why there are no number 10 birthday candles in stores. I was complaining about it with my husband and he said, you're supposed to put a 1 and a 0 together. And that was the lowest point in my entire life. Coral is an animal. I always thought it was just an undersea plant, or the son of Rick Grimes. Okay, here goes. I'm almost a senior citizen, but a couple of weeks ago I learned that they actually laid cable across the Atlantic for telegraph. I was in tears when my hubby told me because I thought he was joking with me when he said they laid cable for telegraph. I said, no they didn't, that's impossible. But he was not joking and cable was put between the continents. Then I got very upset because I was never taught that in school. My grandpa used to take me fishing a lot as a child. He explained that any noise at all would scare the fish in the lake and ruin fishing for everyone there for hours. On a boat with my husband last month at the age of 28. My husband turned on the radio while we were fishing. When I complained, he said, oh honey, Grandpa just wanted you to shut up. I realized Grandpa just wanted some peace and quiet. The song I Saw Mummy Kissing Santa Claus is not about creepy infidelity, but rather hinges on the fact that dads sometimes dress up as Santa, which I realized in my 20s when I brought it up with my Catholic roommate. I'm Jewish, so there's no pretense as to who gives you a pair of socks on the 8th night of Hanukkah. The little pig going wee 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 all the way home was squealing and not peeing. I was in my 20s before I heard someone say it while squealing with their wee, and I did a shocked Pikachu face. I had a friend who at 25 found out that pepperoni was indeed not a vegetable. He ordered a meat lover's supreme. The waitress was both surprised and amused when responding to his concerns about why pepperoni was on his meat-only pizza. I'm trying to imagine both A, what the hell his tongue tells his brain pepperoni tastes like, and B, what the heck he thought a pepperoni looked like in its natural state. Howdy is short for how do you do. Well, color the narrator educated. However, I don't feel especially stupid about this one. It's definitely been sanded down a lot over the centuries. I wonder if someone made a conscious choice or if it was just faster and less pronounced repetitions of how do you do. I guess you do hear some people say howdy doody sometimes, don't you? Interesting. That no, a scientist doesn't actually know everything about every subject in school. I used to think that they were the masters of the world, knowing everything mankind ever learned. I also thought you needed to be a scientist to be president, but oh well. The world would probably be better if that was true. My mum used to tell me that putting too much vinegar on your chips makes your blood dry up, so I've been scared of putting too much on. I'm 25 now and I've just realized that my mum wanted me to save everything due to her being a single mum and in a lot of debt. That Apollo 13 was an actual event and not just a movie starring Tom Hanks. Would have been embarrassing in any context, but all the more so when I was working with Captain James Lovell and asked him why he was signing new paperbacks of Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks on the cover. "Oh, did you work on that movie?" I asked. It was beyond awkward. We had an hour's drive together, and so after he patiently explained that he was on the mission, and as I had not seen the movie, I asked if he would tell me the story. He laughed and agreed. Okay, I've never met anyone who didn't think they already knew the story. Hearing him tell it to me was riveting and special. 25 years later, I still cringe, but it was one of the best days in my life. He's truly an amazing human.
Men of Reddit, we all hear the horror stories about how crazy men can be when they get rejected. But what have been your crazy experiences when you reject a woman? I dated a girl for a couple of weeks, and on the third date, we chilled at my place and talked. She told me that she thought men who watched spicy content were disgusting, and if you were in a relationship, it was cheating. 10 minutes later, she, out of nowhere, asked to use my computer. I knew the last thing that I had open was not going to impress her, so I said maybe some other time. She got way too angry after hearing that and said that her intention was to write me an email about how much she liked me. I call BS. When I said I thought it would be best if we called it a night and I drove her home, she went quiet until about halfway there, when she then says, "My dad's best friend is a cop and I can say what I want." I got the gist, but I figured it was an attempt to make me reconsider. I dropped her off and she started crying very loudly, fell down in her parents' driveway and crawled to the front door. Sure enough, next day I was arrested for SA, and it took a week for her to admit that she made it all up. But the charges weren't dropped for another 7 months. Dude, you should press charges and talk to a lawyer. She shouldn't get away with that. I agree, for 2 reasons. 1, every time someone makes a false SA claim, it hurts the victims who have actually been through it. And 2, I think laws should be put in place to punish those who falsely report crimes such as SA. I rejected a girl once, then about 2 or 3 months later, I was catfished by her. She was, in her words, only proving that I would end up going out with her anyways, by pretending to be somebody completely different. A police report and a restraining order later, she's out of my life. I bet she's still watching you. Beware. Wait, you were able to get a restraining order? Did she show up at your place or something? From what I've heard, it's not easy to get a restraining order. I knew someone who had to call the police on their ex several times before they gave the ex an injunction. Yeah, I'm actually shocked this person got a restraining order so easily. I've heard horror stories of women not being able to get them for their crazy male counterparts. To be fair, I was totally into this girl at first, so my rejection might have stung a little more. We were friends with benefits, and she was legitimately super attractive to me. Just as time went on, I learned more and more about her, and that made me not want to be with her. Hooking up with her, sure, but not like building a life together. So when she made the move to be more than friends with benefits, and I said no, she told me she was gonna hook up with a dude she knew I hated, film it, and send it to me. They're married now, with kids, so I mean, good on them, I guess. Dude, she's playing the long game. She's probably recorded the marriage, the birth of her kids, and will film getting old and gray with the new guy, and only then send you the final edit on her deathbed. That'll teach him. Went on one very low-key date that she asked me on, and let her know as gently as possible that I wasn't feeling it. This chick pulled all sorts of crap after that. Showing up at random places where I was, pretending it was a coincidence, calls from different numbers, making fake social media accounts to not only try to contact me, but also befriend my friends, made a lot of self-harm threats, made up friends and relatives dying, posting photos of me unaware she was nearby, made up boyfriends to try to elicit jealousy, even a fake pregnancy scare from one of said fake boyfriends. Really didn't understand how she thought this was going to sway my opinion. This sort of crap went on for a while until I moved away for unrelated reasons. This was many years ago now, and I can't even remember her name. I hope she's forgotten mine as well. Another woman pulled the "I'm pregnant" card on me after we broke up. Positive test in hand and everything. Drove her to a clinic for a professional test. She wasn't, of course, but what a sick freaking tactic. Yeah, I think it needs to be known how often women use the pregnancy tactic to try and control men. To the point where they will sleep with another man to get pregnant to try and keep the man that they just cheated on. It's wild. She tried to come over to my house and scream at me from the outside. Little did she know my mom doesn't freaking play that crap, and went outside and yelled at her 20 times worse than she ever thought. As a full-grown adult, I had an ex come to my parents' house. While I was there, she had found out on Facebook because I was tagged in some posts, and I guess wanted to talk to me after I had told her that I didn't want to be with her anymore. I had blocked her number and her Facebook after a few attempts to reach me over the last 3 weeks. She showed up to my parents' place and I was helping my dad take out the trash. My mom saw her from the garage and started speed walking towards her car saying, No, get that damn car in reverse, honey. She got to her driver's side window and just started yelling that she should be ashamed to show her face around here, and to have some damn self-respect. I didn't even get towards the car before my ex started backing out. Never tried contacting me again. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Real talk. What's with that speed walking things mom do? Because it's so goddamn terrifying when it's coming for you. When it's pointed at somebody else, it's the funniest looking way to move you've ever seen. But the second you're the target, it's more serious than a late period. And it doesn't matter if it's your mom or not. That's what I don't get. You hear any dad but your own yell and you immediately think, that's not my dad, I'm not in trouble. They could be looking right at you and yelling your name, but you're still not gonna get worried. But if that mom walk starts targeting you, doesn't matter if you've never seen this woman in your life before or not. You start mentally listing all the crap you've done recently that could get you in trouble. I can't speak on the mom walk, but the mom stare is definitely real. My friend once lied to his mom that I got caught smoking at school, which is something I still haven't done to this day, but she straightened her back, stared daggers into my soul, and just said, "You did what?" I panicked and was trying to say something while my friend was just busting out laughing. She slashed my tires when I was at work. My buddies tried to tell me to stay away because she was nutso. I decided to form my own opinion. Conclusion, she was nutso. Does after a breakup count? If so, I was graduating from my master's. I had low self-esteem and my ex was really hinting that she wanted to get married. I didn't. I was super clear on that. She broke it off right before I was about to visit my parents for about a week. I was a bit bummed on my way home and a couple of days after that. Then she called me and said that she wanted to talk when I got back. By then, I had a feeling that she would want to get back together if we got engaged or married. That's exactly what happened. When I get back, she started acting like everything was fine and talked about us getting serious. After that, I sat her down and told her that it was over. I was pissed and she was in the harmful mindset. She even ran to the kitchen and got a knife and threatened to, well, you know. I pulled the knife away from her while getting cut myself and locked her in the bathroom where there was nothing sharp. And I called a friend of mine to give us a ride so I can leave her at her house. At that point, I didn't want to leave her at a cab or act crazy or go missing or something. That's not the end of it either. It had just begun. The next morning, I woke up to 30 texts and 5 missed calls, which I decided to ignore. It escalated to 40 a day and 20 missed calls for about a week. Then notes in my car. Then a friend of hers started coming to my house to talk to me and say what went wrong and apologize for her. I told her that I was not going to get back with her. When that didn't happen, she sent over 2 of her friends to beat me up. Luckily, my friends were in my apartment and they backed off. The next morning, I had 2 slashed tires on my car. Almost missed a job interview. She would stalk me by staying at the cafe across the street from my place for hours, monitoring who came in and who came out and at what time. The final straw was after about 3 months had passed, I started dating a girl and we went to my apartment to DVD and chill. I got a call about an hour in. It was a friend of mine saying that he got a call from my ex saying that the girl with the brown hair and red blouse, exactly my new girlfriend's description, was too ugly for me and she wanted to mess her up. I ended up making my new girlfriend a nice dinner and had a bottle of wine, so I could stall for enough time for my ex to finally leave her post at the cafe. I ended up changing my car, apartment, cell phone, emails, and after that I haven't heard from her since. Man, that beat up situation sounds hilarious. I just imagine 2 guys knocking on your door, trying to be all tough and threatening you when you answer it. Then you slowly open the door and you have a bunch of friends just over watching the game. Yeah, I don't know what she expected out of that. But yeah, I opened the door and 2 guys were standing there and asked, "Are you OP?" I, of course, said yes, and the guys just started pushing and saying that I broke my ex's heart and that I should be in pain as well. Well, I started with the punches, buddies heard me and they came out, with tons of beer bottles in hand. They started to run away after a friend of mine threw one of the bottles at the floor near their feet. My bet is they saw one too many telenovelas. Kind of related, but a friend of mine stalked a boy in her class for almost 2 years and would always tell people, faculty included, how she wanted to marry him and have his kids, and keep him in her basement, etc. It was mostly joking, but her crush on him was real. Anyways, one of the teachers ratted her out, and she got hit with the threat of a restraining order by the OP if he wanted to press charges. She was mortified, but luckily he didn't want to pursue anything with the law. After that, she cooled down with the stalking. A year went by and she said that she was over him, but then decided to solicit him for a hookup via Instagram DMs, and then told everyone about how she did so. She was reported by the faculty member yet again. When are people going to realize that DMs don't stay private anymore? Then again, why did this chick go around telling everybody she did it? So a little backstory, I was in high school and found out this girl was cheating on me, so I broke up with her. She wanted to get back together, but I wasn't going to fall into that again. She texted me like once a month trying to start a conversation to get back together. I kept it to small talk for about 5 minutes each time before killing the conversation. Every time I rejected her, she would get absolutely pissed. She would badmouth me around the school. She tried convincing my friends that I was gay. She tried saying that I beat her, and the list would go on and on. Oh, and she tried convincing me that she was pregnant. She would make comments like, "You're gonna be a dad." So I went to her house on a Saturday and told her that I will pay for a test, but she got really pissed and started making excuses. Luckily, nobody ever believed her, and I graduated now, so I don't have to deal with her. She still tries to get back with me through text every now and then. There was this girl that used to hang out with most of my friends, and came at me with aroused fury. The worst event happened when we were all at my house getting wasted. At first, she was just being flirtatious, but the more she drank, the louder and more obnoxious her advances became, to the point where she was just repeating, "OP, let me get a taste of that popsicle stick." My strategy was to laugh and brush it off, hoping not to agitate whatever primal instincts were fueling that flame in her loins. Eventually, she got up from the couch, gave me this sort of determined look, and said something like, "I'm just gonna taste it." Then she started to rush over to me, when she slipped and straight face planted on the hardwood floor. The floor itself had a crawl space underneath, so the sound reverberated like a bag of bricks just being dropped. While everyone was pointing and laughing, I went and hid in my room. And for the next hour or so, I could hear her wandering around looking for me, yelling and saying weird stuff. Eventually she left, and from what I've seen on her Facebook, it looks like she quit getting wasted and is doing way better today. No more popsicle zombies. That might have been hot if she wasn't wasted. I dated this girl in high school, and she was really clingy, so I broke up with her. I came home the next day to find out that she had been calling my house every 5 minutes and hanging up. She wouldn't stop calling, even after I picked up and asked her not to do it anymore. We had to call the police. I ran into her dad a few days later, and he apologized for her bad behavior. Years later, she moved in with a friend of mine and screwed him out of a ton of money. Apparently, he was giving her money for rent and bills. However, she didn't use it for any of that. She moved out of their apartment, and when my friend got home one night, found out that he was being evicted and his girlfriend was gone. Had a girlfriend holding a knife against my chest when I tried to break up with her. Needless to say, we ended up doing the tango, and I broke up with her another day, by phone, because I wouldn't go nowhere near her with bad news. And people wonder why guys decide to break up with women over the phone or via text. Situations like this is why. Mine is pretty tame in comparison to others, but chick wanted me to ask her out to homecoming, but I had been dating my girlfriend for about 2 years, so I was obviously going to take her. She didn't like that because apparently I was in love with her just because I was nice to her and had conversations with her during English class. Anyway, she asked me and I say no. I tell her that I was going to go with my girlfriend, but she was more than welcome to come hang out with us and we would even dance with her. She got pissed and stormed off. 15 minutes later, I'm smacked in the side of the head with a plate of french fries covered in ketchup. She then proceeded to get some kid to go to the office and say that she threw them because I spit in her face. I almost got expelled because she was in tears and really selling it. Thankfully, the snack bar attendant saw everything and intervened before anything happened. She didn't get in trouble or anything, the school just acted like it was over and done with. She moved to Alaska or something after that. We really need to start punishing people for lying about stuff and trying to get other people in trouble. I was relatively good looking and popular in high school and was aware that girls liked me. One of those girls was someone I was studying with for an AP exam. She lived a couple of blocks away and would come over when I got home from baseball practice. One night we were quizzing each other and she said something to the extent of, "If you get all of them right, I'll let you kiss me." I didn't get them all right, but she told me that I could kiss her anyways. I just kind of chuckled and told her, "Nope, I have to get them all right." And we went back to studying. Later that night, she sent me an email about how she views me as more than a friend and wants to know if I felt the same way. She was a cool girl and I liked hanging out with her, but I didn't want to date her. So I told her how I valued our friendship, etc. I get that it's a cliche response, but rather than accepting it gracefully, she told our AP US history teacher I was harassing her. This history teacher was also my baseball coach. Now, if you watch American teen movies, but you didn't play sports, you probably think that my teacher/coach told me that we would speak about it later. Then we would have a good laugh about it in the locker room. If you actually played sports, you're probably aware that I was benched for the next game and spent the next couple of practices running laps around the perimeter of the field. I guess it's not really a horror story per se, but it's still a crappy thing to do because a guy turned you down. We were friends and hooked up a couple of times. I told her I didn't want to hook up with her anymore because I was interested in somebody else. We talked on and off for a bit, but never really hung out because of our history, and I didn't feel comfortable with seeing her in person, except strictly platonically. Then one day, she texted me saying that she was SA'd and that she needed someone to talk to. I call her to see if she was okay, and she was bawling her eyes out on the phone. I made an exception about not seeing her in person this time. When I was with her, she ran to me and cried in my arms for a little bit, then slowly started reaching into my pants. I told her I wasn't into that, and she went off. She started screaming about how I could reject her in her time of need, that she just needed somebody to care about her, love her, to hold her, and to touch her, etc. The real kicker though, somewhere in her rambling, she said that she completely lied about the whole thing. I dropped her off a block away from her house, told her to get the hell out of my car, and just ghosted her after that. Like I've said in this video already, we really need to get some strict laws about people lying about serious things. This is about my sister-in-law's best friend. I couldn't stand being around her. She was obnoxious, stupid, and dressed like a $10 lady of the night. My brother and sister-in-law were always planning date nights for the four of us, and then they would find a way to recede into the night so that the two of us would be alone. I was nice at first, but then her flirting went into overdrive. She was always smiling at me, caressing me, and laughing at my jokes even though I wasn't trying to be funny. I had to put the brakes on everything and become short with my answers and practically sat on my hands. I wanted to make sure I wasn't sending any signals out. After several get-togethers, she finally got the hint. Unfortunately, she couldn't handle the rejection and started bad-mouthing me to everyone with the listening ear. I was confronted several times by my family members and mutual friends about how mean I was to her. I was even told that she told someone I didn't even know that I got wasted and started grabbing her. She couldn't handle rejection like a grown-up, so she made me out to be the jerk. I was dating a girl, she was about 20 and I was about 22 at the time, and things were clearly not working out. And the only thing that kept me from ending things was that I had left my favorite John Mayer hoodie at her place and couldn't figure out how to get it back without a whole bunch of awkwardness. I decided that there was no way around it, so I called her to tell her that it wasn't working out and that we needed to end things, and that I'm coming over to get my sweatshirt, but she could leave it on her porch if she didn't want to talk to me or see me. No luck there. I pull up to her house, and she is standing in her front yard. My hoodie is laying behind her in the grass. I get out of my car, and before I can say anything, she starts yelling at me. I should mention that it was a nice mid-June evening, and many of her neighbors in this idyllic picture of suburbia were sitting on their porches and got to witness all of this. This goes on for about 13 minutes, non-stop, with her going on and on while I say nothing. Finally, she runs out of things to yell, and she is finally catching her breath. So I ask, "Can I have my hoodie back?" She throws it at me, and I bolt for the car and out of the driveway before she can start up again. The best part? My hoodie was unharmed. I'm not gonna lie, when I first read this story, I laughed when they said John Mayer hoodie. I guess his girlfriend's body wasn't a wonderland. I figured why not end the video with a personal story. I don't know if this would be considered a rejection officially, but I did date a girl for 5 years that handled the breakup pretty terribly. Like I stated, we dated for over 5 years, and I can honestly say that it should have ended 2.5 years earlier. But hey, when you're a young guy, you think more with your little head more than your big one. Well, fast forward to me finally getting the courage to break up with her. If you need to know the final straw, she kept talking to me about some work trip she was going on and how it was going to change her. And I knew what that meant. She was going to do a bunch of things that I would hate or disagree with. Once I did this, I felt a sigh of relief, but also like a dummy, I jumped right into another relationship because I thought that was a smart thing to do at the time. Well, one day, my idiot self sent a text to my ex that was meant for my new girlfriend, who my ex had no idea existed. She thought I was still single. Well, the month that followed had my ex calling my mom, telling her that she was pregnant, which made my family freak out on me. Don't worry, the baby wasn't mine, and if I remember correctly, she didn't even have a baby for another 2 years. so that was a lie. She also called my mom while my new girlfriend was at my house to inform me that she was at a crisis center because she was thinking about ending it all. Oh, and of course, since Facebook was all the rage at the time, she found my new girlfriend and decided to talk to her. That was on top of other things like she would tell me that she downed a whole bottle of Everclear, falling asleep in a bathtub full of water, and about how she destroyed her brand new car that I made a couple of payments on. Basically, she was trying to do everything she could to ruin my new relationship. I also believe she randomly showed up at my house once or twice. So it's safe to say she didn't handle things well, but to be fair, my new relationship wasn't going to last that long either anyways, because I found out that my new lady was hiding 2 kids from me and lying about them being hers. People who quit their jobs in a blaze of glory. What's your story? I used to work recording concerts for a school conservatory. Basically, students would pay a fee for the conservatory to record their concerts and put them on CD for them. I had had the job as a work study since I was a freshman, and I loved it. In the second half of my senior year, I received a call from my boss saying that I messed up on a CD and that I needed to meet with him in the studio to fix it at 4 p.m. I thought it was an odd request. Mistakes sometimes happen, but all of the employees knew how to fix them themselves, and I was the most experienced worker that they had at that point. I asked if I could just fix it earlier and submit it to the office assistant, but he insisted I come in at 4. I showed up about 15 minutes before 4 to figure out what had gone wrong. I put the CD in and immediately could hear that it was a CD of a completely different concert. That was really bizarre, but we have backups of all the audio, so I just burned another CD of the correct concert from that. As the CD was burning, my boss came in and told me that I was fired. He told me screwing up a CD that badly was unacceptable. I had never been fired before. This was the longest job I had ever had, and I was totally blindsided. To this day, I have no idea how the wrong concert ended up on that CD. The best I could figure is that the office assistant mixed up the CDs or something. But whoever's fault it was, it had a really easy problem to fix. I argued with him for a bit by telling him that I thought he was making a big mistake, and this really wasn't a huge deal. But he refused to listen. Just when I resigned myself to my fate, the newly burned CD popped out of the computer. We both looked at it for 5 seconds in silence. Then I laughed, handed it to him, and shook his hand and then walked out the door. I wasn't done though. I loved that job and I felt wronged. I was also saving up for a trip to Europe and I didn't want to have to cancel it. I had already had my tickets to Waken. Without a job or a girlfriend, I had a lot of time on my hands that semester. So I decided I would just start my own business recording students' concerts using my own equipment. I charged slightly lower fees than my former employer and put ads online and around the conservatory. I advertised that I was more experienced than anyone working at the conservatory audio, and frankly, my equipment was better as long as they weren't playing one of the big venues, especially for jazz shows. Also, instead of burning CDs, I offered my clients to just send them the audio digitally, which a lot of students preferred because they would just get it within an hour or so after the concert had ended rather than several days later. College kids are cheap, and it didn't take long before I had to hire my own assistant to keep up with all the concerts that we were recording. I probably ended up cutting the conservatory's audio department business by 20%. My former boss was livid, and he made a couple of unsuccessful attempts to shut us down. I had earned more money that semester than I probably had in my previous 3.5 years combined of working for someone else. I was just mad at myself for not doing this earlier. The only problem is, I don't feel comfortable putting that job on my resume anymore. I know that feeling. I can't use my last job as a reference either, but I'll be telling my story later on in this video. Not me, but my dad. He was a partner in a software company and they were undergoing a merger. There was a ton of confusion in the move, and one guy was trying to take advantage of the situation. He was from the other company. He fired my dad for no reason. However, my dad was really well liked at his company. So much so that many of the employees from his company walked out of the building when he left with his stuff. One guy apparently came running down to the parking lot because he realized the guy that fired my dad did not have the authority to do so. My dad put his things in the car, goes back upstairs, fires the guy who tried to fire him, and then quits. I don't know if this is a blaze of glory, but it made me feel good. I got a job in a big city. My new manager said that she wanted to give me a 2-week trial period because she just wasn't sure about me. This manager was a total B, constantly yelling, expecting us to work through lunch, work late, and come in early. Had sessions in her office about how awful we were. I was miserable and the job was hell. The Friday of the end of my trial period, my manager called me into her office. She said that she was pleasantly surprised at how good I was and that she definitely wanted to keep me on. I told her that unfortunately she had not passed my trial period and I would not be staying. When I walked out, it was the best elevator ride down to the lobby ever. People often forget that employment is a two-way street. It's always refreshing to remind them of that. When that boss said there was a trial period, my brain was like, I would have told her she's on my trial period too. Glad the OP did that in the end. I drove for about 4 hours for a job interview that was right out of grad school. Nice place, working environment seemed a little tense, but that's alright. This was an animal shelter in the Midwest. The owner asked me to clean a cage for him. I said sure, doctors have to clean out cages every once in a while. It takes about 10 seconds. Then he asked me to hang out for a second while he talked to a client. I said sure. He told me to just keep cleaning the cages. I thought he was kidding. A technician walked into the room and asked me why the cages weren't done. I shrugged. From her attitude, I gathered that he wasn't kidding about the cages. After a wait in excess of 20 minutes, I just left. Got a phone call about 5 minutes later. I didn't answer it. Wait, he was making you clean cages during a job interview? What? There are so many things wrong with that. Free labor? What a turd move. Probably just didn't want to do it themselves. It's also illegal. I was a server in a really crappy restaurant. It was owned by a husband and wife. The wife was truly in charge and responsible for actually getting almost everything done. The husband was a hot-headed jerk who would show up from time to kick the cook out of the kitchen to play chef himself. He was a terrible cook. His wife did her best to just keep him out of the restaurant altogether, but he was a jerk and he did as he pleased. Luckily, he was also lazy, and restauranting is work, so he wasn't there often. Anyways, one day on a slow morning, when I was the only server, he came in to cook breakfast and was just ruining everything. He was smoking a cigar in the kitchen, using way too much grease and just burning everything. Customers would order scrambled eggs and bacon. How hard is that? And he would give me a blackened mystery substance dripping with grease to bring to their table. I refused. He screamed at me within earshot of the customers and told me that he was the restaurateur, not me, so I better do as I was told. So I took that crap food to the tables. They complained and asked me to replace it while looking at me like they couldn't believe that I would bring such food to their table in the first place. I brought it back to the kitchen and Hothead couldn't believe that they didn't want it. He doesn't believe me and yells at me some more. I am not about to bring the same food out to that table, so I refuse and tell him to do it himself. As you can imagine, he did not like that very much and he let me know very loudly. But he did take the food out to them. They gave him the same response they gave me, and he shouted at them. He shouted a whole rant at them about how they had no idea what food was, and that he grew up in Greece where food was an art. And he went to school and owned a restaurant, so what credentials could they have? Who are they to question food? He told them this restaurant was only for people who truly appreciated food and that they could go eat elsewhere. They did leave in silence. I think they were too shocked at what had just happened to come up with a rebuttal. When he came back from his incident with them, he told me that I was on thin ice and he didn't care for the backtalk I had given him. He said if I didn't like how he runs things, I should just leave. I was the only server in that place, and I was so pissed off I couldn't see straight. And he had just told me to leave if I didn't like how he operated. Well, I didn't like how he operated, so I left. He must have not realized that there were no other servers, because I immediately got a voicemail about how it was all a misunderstanding and I should come back because they were busy. How they were busy, I don't know, and everything would be all right. Luckily, I was working 2 jobs at the time, so I had the option to just pick up more hours at my other job. I didn't answer his calls until hours later when the voicemail started sounding really desperate. All I said was I can't talk because I was working my other job and I'm not coming back, so stop calling. I heard from ex-coworkers that his wife came in shortly thereafter, cried uncontrollably, and closed the place down for the rest of the day. That did make me feel bad because she was a nice lady who worked really hard, and I can only imagine how hard it was to try and run a restaurant with a husband like that. If that man is like that in public, I would hate to see how he is in private. I feel bad for that wife. I was an investigative reporter in Cleveland and had turned in a solid story about State Senator Kevin McLaughlin using his campaign finance money to buy Ohio State game tickets and hotel rooms for his mistress. It was approved by the editor and publisher, but the CEO, Matt Haggerty, spiked it when Coughlin threatened a lawsuit. I told him to go screw himself on the conference call with his people, before security escorted me out of the building. I sent the spike story to everyone in my Rolodex. It circulated the state house, and a couple of weeks later, Coughlin dropped out of the race for governor. I sued the paper and Coughlin for wrongful termination. Coughlin agreed that he never had grounds for a lawsuit, and I settled with the company. Slate and a few other publications wrote about my graceful exit. 10 out of 10 would tell him to screw himself again. This is the reason why we need journalists. They tend to get a bad rap, but who else watches the watchers? One of my first jobs was part-time at some small-budget supermarket. The boss was a wanker of severely limited intelligence, assigning me far more shifts than I agreed to and spending the entire day shouting at everybody, rather than doing actual work. Turns out I was also getting €1 less per than agreed upon. I noticed that after a month when I finally got my first paycheck. Not cool, grounds enough for me to terminate my work contract with immediate effect. So I got myself a new job, typed out my notice, put it in my coat pocket, and waited for the worst possible moment to quit. The moment came 2 weeks later. My boss and I were opening on a Saturday, and it just so happened that the cashier that was supposed to come in an hour later called in sick. He tells me and goes off on a tirade about how the shift is going to be hell with just the two of us. I smile, hand in my notice, and stroll out of the store without saying a word. Best feeling ever. Was working as a busser at Outback in college, animation major. Was there roughly 6 months. Never called out, always came in when asked to. Finals were coming up, and I was slightly behind on my final project. Called the manager 3 days in advance. I needed a day off I was scheduled for. Told me I had to get it covered. No problem. I called all the other bidders and even 2 hostesses. No one could or would do it. Called the boss back. His response, and I quote, "You need to decide right now what's more important, school or your career." I exploded on the guy with the easiest decision I've ever made in my life. I never understood the school versus career comment. Are people stupid enough to think people just go to college for fun and are not trying to get a better career? Not a blaze, more like a slow burn. Used to be a Comcast tech, put in my 2 weeks notice and got as many parking tickets as I could. The tickets couldn't be pegged to me because I don't own the vehicle. Comcast has a policy that employees need to pay their own parking tickets, but by the time Comcast got the tickets in the mail, I wouldn't have been an employee anymore. And you know the phenomenon where work vehicles can park wherever they want and not get a ticket? That doesn't apply to vehicles that say Comcast on the side. I still imagine the curses made in my name after they uncovered the extent of my evil plot. Wasn't me, but I was a department supervisor at a Best Buy for a while back in the early 2000s. We had 10 rows of various software. The store manager always had this one employee rearrange the planogram each week. It sucked. The dude had enough. He farted into the overhead intercom, shouted, "Eat my junk!" and shoulder blocked the software rack to the ground. Knowing I was going to have to clean it up, I was never more pissed at a person. Looking back, never more impressed. Bumped into him last year at the same Best Buy. He smiled and said, "Looks like they stopped selling software." I'm not gonna lie, the farting into the overhead comm got me. I worked at a technical support call center for almost a decade. The average burnout time or turnover was in 6 months. I was sitting in a meeting. They were ragging on us for sending out too many boxes. The week previously, we were sitting in the exact same room being ragged on for not sending enough boxes. I had a rough year, and I was just sitting there dying inside. I had this sudden epiphany. Every day since I walked into the door of that place was worse than the last. There was literally no reason for me to be there. That thought had just popped into my head like a light bulb went off. I got up in the middle of the meeting and just walked out without a word. The SDM that was giving the meeting just had their mouth hung open. He wasn't used to the drones doing things like this. He started after me and I ignored him. I went back to my desk and gathered up some things, gave a few other things to some people, and gave a goodbye email. The whole time the SDM was getting more and more agitated trying to talk to me, eventually yelling. I just ignored him like a bad smell at a dinner party. So I just went home. They called and called for days. Eventually, a supervisor that had me on Facebook messaged me. He was an okay dude, and I told him flatly that I was not returning. He said that we had a lot of paperwork to do and an exit interview and so on. I said no, I wasn't going back on that floor. I wasn't going to sit in an office like a bad teenager in the principal's office. It was over. I was done. We finally agreed to meet downstairs in an empty cubicle. I flatly didn't agree to anything, didn't sign anything, and just gathered whatever stuff they had for me and I left. For near a decade, they dictated everything in my life. My sleep schedule, my family life, holidays. They went so far as to time the seconds of how long I was in the bathroom during the day. That was all over. They had no more control over me, and I enjoyed making that clear. A call center is the worst job I've ever had, and I worked as a plumber one summer. Why not end this video with a personal story? Because I made sure that the people at my old job would remember me quitting. So first, I have to give you a little backstory. I worked at my old job for 8 years. It was a full-time gig at an automotive plant where we did a lot of testing on different vehicle parts. It was a place with a lot of lifers. They like to complain about how young people didn't want to work anymore, because the job also had a lot of turnover. But if you were like me, someone who could be counted on, came in on their days off, and actually did their job well, you had a lot of freedom at the company. Well, after I learned how the politics of the whole company worked, I quickly became known as the guy that would speak up about problems in the workplace. A lot of those lifers would just say that I was complaining and I didn't want to do the job. Well, I didn't hear those same people complaining when I pointed out that the whole company wasn't paying overtime correctly for the last 2 years, and magically, everyone just got crazy overtime checks to fix the mistake. I guess I'm just lazy though. The job was mostly boring and I often dreaded going to work. But I stayed at the job so long because it was easy, the pay was good, and I just started taking my laptop to work to edit my YouTube videos. Since I was counted on so much during my shift, I was given a lead position and I worked directly with supervisors to make sure we took care of all the necessary problems. Well, after some drama in the workplace, we had a new shift manager that oversaw all 3 shifts, who was also a lifer. We will call them Billy Bob, and I have to say, dude was pretty cool until he wasn't. You see, one day, I was going to go on vacation and I noticed that there wasn't going to be a lead operator in charge while I was gone. So I said to Billy Bob, yo, I have scheduled vacation next week and there isn't a lead for the shift scheduled, so you're gonna have to figure that out. There was no aggression or sinister tone behind those words or anything. But I do remember him giving me this weird look, which I thought was odd because I was just letting my boss know that there was something that needed to be solved or there might be problems later. I should also mention that I was taking this vacation to burn my personal days because I was on the verge of quitting that job. I, for many years, wanted to make the leap into content creation full time, and I felt like the job was holding me back. Plus, my job also had this dumb rule of, if you don't use it, you lose it, when it came to vacation time, so I wasn't going to give them free days after working all those years. Well, when I returned from my vacation, I had officially made up my mind that I was going to put in my 2 weeks, and I told this to my shift lead, and he was like, are you serious? Because that saves me from having to have a talk with you. I was like, for what? Well, apparently you pissed off Billy Bob before you left by saying he needs to figure something out. And he went straight to HR and tried to find some dirt on you. Then he went and pulled all of your time cards and said that he found some issues. So now you have a meeting scheduled on Monday with HR, him, and other management. Are you serious? That's petty as hell. But you know what? Tell them I'm down for the meeting. I can't wait. By the way, those issues they found were that I wasn't working full-time hours because this was during COVID and they cut our hours down to 32 hours a week and specifically said that people could leave if it was slow and we had coverage. So I left a lot with my boss's approval. Anyways, what I need to let you guys and gals know is I can be really cool to work with. As long as you do your job and you don't make my job harder, we will be best friends. But the moment you try to screw me over, I will become your worst enemy. When you have worked at a place for 8 years with a bunch of dudes that like to gossip more than a high school cheerleading squad, you get a lot of dirt on people that you work with, and I had a lot of dirt on this shift manager. So when word got around that I was quitting and that I was happily waiting for this HR meeting because I had a few things to bring up, well, after that was known, the HR meeting magically disappeared. Well, he's quitting in 2 weeks anyways, so why even bother meeting with him? Now, I don't know about y'all, but if I had an employee that was abusing their time cards, I wouldn't want them to stick around at the company any longer than they needed to be. But hey, that's just me. So since I didn't get a chance to get my revenge, I decided why not make the day I quit memorable. So over the next few days, I hatched a plan to make sure that I left my mark on this job that I had spent almost a decade at. First off, with TikTok being all the rage, I decided to make a video that I would upload the day I quit. Secondly, I wanted to leave something behind that would have people be reminded of me when I'm long gone. So I made some stupid meme stickers that I hid all around the campus of my work. Each sticker had me doing some kind of dumb expression. For example, I made this stupid one that said, "This clock needs new batteries, or you just learned that time moves slower here," which was obviously hid behind a time clock that I stared at for years. Another one said, "Hey, stop peeing back here." And I hid that outside because we once had a problem where workers were pissing on company property instead of in the bathrooms. But my favorite of the 5 stickers that I made said this: "What are you doing down here? Looking for a raise?" And I stuck it right under my shift manager's desk. Lastly, I planned not to finish out my 2 weeks. Our pay period ended on Saturday and I decided, you know what, I think I'll leave on Saturday instead of working another week. So on my final day, I texted my shift lead and my shift manager that today was going to be my last day, and I made sure to use the words, "You don't have a lead for tomorrow, so you're gonna have to figure that out." And I just left my job. Oh, and that TikTok that I mentioned, it was of me going around my whole workplace flipping off every camera that they had installed on campus. I even got in a golf cart and drove around the building to hit all the outside cameras. Last time I checked, that video had like 70,000 views on TikTok, and the day following my graceful exit from the company, I had a lot of people texting me that they saw it, and one particular manager wasn't happy, on top of needing to scramble to find some coverage when I decided to quit on the weekend. My friend also told me that upper management blocked anyone from seeing the cameras because they didn't want anyone knowing what I did on campus. Oh, and to my knowledge, only 3 of the 5 stickers I hid have been found 2 years later. All in all, I can say that I've never been happier since I quit that place. Tattoo artists, who was your worst tattoo virgin? Had a customer that wanted a little watermelon slice on his thigh. Cool 5 to 10 minute nice and easy first tattoo. Nope, on the 3rd line I hear this weird little low-pitched moan. Look up and his head flipped back and the rest of him followed. When he woke up on the floor to 3 guys trying to pull him back up, he said something along the lines of, "What the freak, why are you guys touching me? That's gay." It's been 3 or 4 years since then and he still hasn't come back in to get it finished. If I didn't know better, I feel like that would be a comedy skit on YouTube. This old lady, maybe late 50s, early 60s, comes into our shop. She's quite timid as she approaches the front desk. I say hello and ask what we can do for her. We'll call her AB. "I've never had a tattoo before." "That's fine. It's not as scary as you think. What is it that you want done today?" "Well, my boyfriend is finally letting me have a tattoo." I had a shocked look on my face. "But I just wanted something small and out of the way. So if I change my mind, I don't have to look at it too often." "Okay, that's fair. What is it that you wanted?" "I want Andy's B written on my hoo-ha." Nope. We didn't do the tattoo. It was either some horribly controlling partner that wanted her branded with his name, or some BDSM kink that I didn't consent to be a part of. Screw that. I've heard horror stories about women getting branded with tattoos for illegal purposes. Scary stuff. Also, if I was the tattoo artist who was talking to this lady, I would have been like, "Hey, yo!" Girl comes in to get her ex-boyfriend's name tattooed as a tramp stamp. Comes in with friends and proceeds to scream throughout the process of doing the outline. And she leaves with half of an outline of her ex's name. Why would anyone ever tattoo their ex's name on themselves? Kid wanted to get a full sleeve as his first ever tattoo. I convinced him to get a smaller tattoo for his first ever. Now this sounds like an exaggeration, but he proceeded to throw up after 5 seconds. Dude, I made a similar mistake for my first tattoo. Got a half sleeve on my upper arm. After the line work was done, I had to take a break. Didn't puke though. The rest, a complex solid black design, had to be broken up into a few separate sessions because it hurt far more than I thought it would. Fortunately, my artist was a saint. I dated a tattoo artist for a couple of years and spent a good chunk of time at the shop. One time, a girl we knew from school came in for a large tattoo on her ribs. I think it was some flowers. Anyways, everything is set up, she's stenciling and laying on the chair just chatting and waiting. As soon as the needle hits her skin, she starts screaming bloody murder, moaning and begging him to stop. So he stops, shocked, and she tells him, in her normal voice, to ignore her and keep going. Screaming fit proceeds. Every so often he stops to check if she was alright, and she responds in a normal, cheerful tone that she's excited to see how the work turns out. Needle hits skin, back to screaming like she's being eaten by a pack of wolves. I watched a couple of people walk into the shop and turn around and walk right out. I'm surprised cops didn't show up. Anyways, I think he only got the outlines and some shading done before he couldn't deal with it anymore, and said something about scheduling another session because he had another client coming in. She never came back to get it finished. That's so weird. This type of story seems to be reoccurring in this thread. It's like people have split personalities when it comes to pain or something. That, or she just really liked the pain, if you know what I mean. A friend who never had a tattoo before wanted one on her ankle and was adamant about that. I told her several times that the ankle is a very not fun location, and I asked her if maybe she would prefer something on the shoulder instead. She insisted on the ankle. Okay then. The moment the needle touched her, she hollered. "You sure you want to keep going?" I asked. She said yes. That was the loudest appointment I've ever had, but to her credit, she made it through. Oh wow, reading this thread is bringing up so many repressed client memories. My worst one by far though was about 5 years ago when I was apprenticing in a college town. This girl came in with her boyfriend for a traditional butterfly above her elbow. I was super new, so it took me way longer than it should have. Maybe 2 hours? I lay her down on her stomach with her arm bent to her side. This is relevant later. Anyways, we start tattooing, and within 10 minutes, she started getting a string of text messages from her freshman friends, telling her they're essentially ousting her from their friend group, and they don't want her to contact them ever again. Super mean stuff. Obviously, she's upset, and she's relating all of this to her boyfriend. She starts crying and then full on sobbing. I asked her if she wanted to stop, and she insisted on me continuing, and I just felt too awkward to counter her. She continued to sob on and off for probably another hour, while I just kept plugging away at this dumb little tattoo. At this point, she has cried so much that her tears have gathered where her arm was pressed against the massage table, and they had started to spill over into my lap. So I'm feeling uncomfortable as hell and now also damp. Then, as I'm within 30 minutes or so of finishing, she begins whimpering, then moaning, loudly. At one point, she tells the BF, "This is more intense than hooking up where the sun don't shine." And I wanted to die. As soon as I finished and checked her out, my coworkers, who had all been waiting for me to close, were like, "What the actual crap was going on? Why did you keep going?" But in that moment, all I could think of was to finish that tattoo as soon as possible. To her credit, she came back a year later and told me that she had been too embarrassed to come back, but that she loved the butterfly and wanted another tattoo from me. Her second session was pleasant and without incident. Dude, you deserve a medal for sitting through all of that. What a 180. So she was technically never a client, but I had a teenage girl, about 16 years old, come in once. She wanted a tattoo of a rose on the side of her neck. Now, I'm certainly not going to ever entertain a neck tattoo for a teenager, period, but she didn't even bother to bring in a parent with her to sign for her. So it went from a certain no to an absolutely never in a million years. She got pretty upset and made a scene in the front area, and I told her to leave. After a lot of arguing, she finally left, but not before making an idle threat. Other than sharing the story with my coworkers over drinks later and having a laugh at her audacity, I think no more of it. Until the following week when an incredibly angry middle-aged woman comes barging into the shop screaming how she's going to have us all shut down and sent to jail. Everybody in the shop was pretty confused, and after we got her to stop screaming at all of us, we finally got out of her why she was so angry. Apparently, her daughter went out and got a neck tattoo without her knowledge. It was around then that I recognized the girl from the week before peeking into the front window. It all clicked. She had found some sketchy artist in a kitchen to tattoo the rose on her neck that I said no to. I told the mother to call her daughter in, and her daughter pointed at me and told her mom that I was the one who did it. The tattoo was terribly done, to say the least, so the mom definitely had several reasons to be livid. She started getting upset again and yelling about how she was going to get me fired and sent to jail, etc. I let her yell until she calmed down enough to listen. Then I explained to her how the week before I told her daughter outright that I would not give her a neck tattoo. Her daughter screamed that I was a liar, and mom started up with another round of yelling, this time about how I was calling her daughter a liar. It was around this time that I just decided to point at our CCTV camera in the front area until the mother noticed what I was doing and stopped. I told her if she would like to, she could review the footage of me denying her daughter, the temper tantrum, and then her daughter leaving the shop. We usually keep footage for about a week or two and then we delete it, so I knew it should still be on the computer. Her daughter started looking pretty nervous around this time, but she didn't say anything. Meanwhile, I find the footage from that day, and the mom watches the entire interaction that I described go down. Then, with the coldest look of anger, betrayal, and disappointment, she turns to her daughter, she takes her outside of the shop quietly, and then screams at her outside for basically everything that just happened and how humiliating it had all been. After a bit, the daughter comes in and gives me a very sarcastic apology and then leaves. Now at this time I was still willing to tattoo minors with parental consent, but I had been having a lot of crappy dealings with them and occasionally with their parents. I had been considering a no minor at all policy, but this experience solidified that in my mind. Aside from 1 or 2 exceptions, I haven't tattooed any minors for the last 13 years. I'm always surprised that you could or can get a tattoo underage with guardian consent. Stuff like that almost always feels like an outdated rule only put in place for child brides. Well, I got a piercing while I was underage, nose piercing when I was 17. I'm Indian American, so it's more traditional for us to have nose piercings at young ages. And also I convinced my mom to let me get one if I had a certain score on my ACT. It was surprisingly hard to do. The shop I went to refused to pierce me unless I brought my mom and my actual birth certificate. Like they wouldn't accept a passport or driver's license. I had to bring my actual birth certificate. It was wild. This girl's first tattoo, and she was my first paying customer. I tattooed people for free during my apprenticeship. She wanted a star outline on the side of her heel below her ankle. She was a bit nervous, so I allowed 2 of her friends to come in with us in the room. I started the tattoo and she immediately jerked away super hard. I warn her not to do that and try to relax. I continue and she jerks her foot again. The 2 lines I've done now look like crap, and I'm already pissed and freaking out inside. I got her 2 friends to hold down her foot and she continues to jerk around, and at one point kicks me right in the jaw. Needless to say, her tattoo looked like crap, and I was certainly crestfallen. I called my mentor after work crying that I had ruined my first tattoo on my client, and she kicked me in the face, which he said, "Wait, what? Nah, screw that. That's not your fault. I'll see you tomorrow at work." Been tattooing for 13 years now, and I still love every minute of it. Got way crazier stories under my belt since that kick in the face. Whoa, you're not allowed to end with "I got way crazier stories under my belt, please share more." Fine, I'll share a few that aren't too long, but they still pack a punch. My first PP tattoo I ever did was on a man that you would never expect at first glance. Some background, studio at the time was small with a shared space among a few tattoo artists. Salon style. This person was a polite young white man who showed up looking like Mr. Rogers, sweater vest and all. He was scheduled to get his first tattoo, a name on the hip. Don't get names of lovers, people. I attempted to convince him that it's not a great idea, but he was adamant. Fine, whatever, I'll get set up. He comes back with his lady, and I ask him to show me exactly where he wants the tattoo. He shimmies his pants down so that the base of his peepee is showing and points there. Whoa! I again try to convince him not to do this, going as far to call him stupid and admitting I've never tattooed a peepee before. He is begging me to do it. Normally, I would flatly refuse wiener tattoos in general, but I did want to try at some point, and he was very polite and not pervy. I told him that I would have to charge him more, and he agreed. He lied down with his pants half off. I wrote the name like I was writing a check. Finished so quickly that my coworkers didn't even notice that I tattooed a wiener. Sometimes I wonder if they are still together. Probably not. During my apprenticeship, my mentor consulted with a woman who wanted to get the ruins of her 2 husbands. Yes, plural. This lady was some gnarly redneck who was polyamorous and into some sort of BDSM lifestyle. One husband was this goatee white dude, the other was a black postal worker. Strange trio, but whatever floats your boat. The first red flag during the consulting was the lady asking, would you mind if my husbands put cigarettes out on my body while you tattoo me? My mentor refused for sanitary reasons and also what the freak reasons. He made me stay in the room for the appointment so he wouldn't be alone with them. Come tattoo time, all 5 of us are in the room, and the second the needle starts, of course, she starts moaning. I'm cringing inside. My mentor asks her to be quiet and not to move so much. She keeps moaning, and one of her husbands grabs her by the face and tells her to shut the freak up. The tattoo continues in painfully awkward silence. My mentor is no stranger to weird crap, but even he was freaked out. Last one, Early in my career, I submitted some work to a tattoo magazine since Instagram wasn't a thing yet. I sent them to a small part of the magazine where they share one photo per artist, but they called me and asked me if I was interested in doing an entire article. Jackpot! They interviewed me and asked for a photo of me as well as some of my work. I'm a female tattoo artist and this is relevant later. I submitted one photo of me tattooing wearing a t-shirt, not sexy, and it was quite modest. A few months later, the article comes out. Everything is cool until a couple of months after when I get a letter to the studio. Inside was a rambling letter about how they liked my work and wondering if I could offer some tips. It was from an inmate at the prison in another state. It dawned on me that prisons get tattoo magazines, and the article published my studio and address if someone wanted to get a tattoo from me. More creepy letters followed. One guy said that he was getting out in 4 months and wanted to take me out for a drink. The creepiest one came from a man whose entire face was covered in tattoos, rambled about how beautiful I was, and lamenting that he would never get out to meet me. Curious, I looked him up by his inmate number required on the envelope to see why he would never get out. Turns out, he murdered his girlfriend. Yeah, that's definitely not gonna get you a first date. My ex started screaming in pain. The needle wasn't even touching her yet. I was the tattoo virgin. Went in for my first piece, 5+ hours. Was obviously nervous, and I'm not great with needles. But as soon as we started, I was like, oh, this is way easier than I built it up to be. I'm feeling the pain, but I knew I'd be able to commit. After about 20 minutes later, I started to feel really dizzy. My vision is going, so I sit up. My tattoo artist stops immediately, and she's talking to me, but I can barely hear her. The world is closing in, and it's only getting worse. I think she asked me if I need to go to the bathroom, but I know I'll make it a step or two before passing out if I stand up. I can't tell her this because my brain is not working and speech is not an option. Then I just start gagging. The artist is scrambling for something to help me, but she is not fast enough. I vomit into my mask, my hands all over my dress, into my hair, and onto the floor. It's a mess. I'm a mess. I immediately feel better and go to the bathroom to clean up whilst the poor artist is wiping up the rest. I come back still stinking of vomit. I offer to take my dress off and literally sit there in my underwear while she finishes. She completes the tattoo like a champion. She sits with me in the vomit aura for another 5 hours. I am mortified and make sure I tip extra for the inconvenience, but the tat is stunning, so it was worth every minute. I'll bring a bucket next time just in case. Hey, no worries, I caught a girl who passed out getting a tiny wrist tattoo. Like, I physically caught her. I was in the shop with my sister. I had just finished my calves and was watching him tattoo my sister when I watched this girl wobble and caught her in my arms when she fell backwards off the stool. I literally thought to myself, wow, people really do pass out. All fun and games until I passed out while getting my thigh piece colored. It wasn't even the pain, just the heat, and I hadn't eaten. It was my 8th tattoo. I was so embarrassed, but apparently it happens all the time. I haven't thrown up yet, but I have to go finish that same piece, so it's a good chance that I might. But if I do, I'll come back here and emphasize it. I like to think I'm pretty good at handling pain, but I've never gotten a tattoo, so I don't think I'll ever be able to compare. Had a 19-year-old lad in the studio. He wanted Laura in large letters on his forearm. I took my time to quiz him. Turns out Laura was his sweetheart. I also spent a long time explaining that tattoos are for life and girlfriends come and go. He remained adamant and clearly explained that if I don't do it, he had a friend with a tattoo gun who would. So I did it, wrapped it up and explained aftercare. As he left, I checked the time. Great, 22 minutes to my next client. 22 minutes later, my client turned up on perfect time, followed less than a minute later by Mr. Loverboy. Apparently, he met Laura at the park who instantly dumped him for being so freaking stupid. It appears she didn't love him as much as he loved her. 22 minutes from tattoo to requesting a cover-up. I'll never understand name tattoos. I cringe when I think about planning my life together with somebody when I was 18 years old. I can only imagine cringing at the name of a former love interest tattooed on my body. One shop I worked at, we had a couple come in on the day we did $100 2" by 2" tattoos. They both were getting some small triceratops outline tattooed behind their ears. Nothing too crazy or detailed, so maybe about 15 minutes each in the chair at most. The guy was losing his mind. He's hyperventilating, laughing, jumping up and down, and yelling questions at us. Visually very nervous. He tells one of our apprentices that this is his first tattoo and keeps asking them how bad it hurts over and over again. The owner went into the back and grabbed an ammonia packet, worried that this guy would pass out the second the needle touched skin. Turns out it was the couple's first date. He had told her that he was very impulsive, and she tried to call his bluff and suggest they get matching tattoos. To his credit, he got the tattoo and didn't pass out. Paid for both of them too. Bro, I hope they stayed together, because if not, that might be worse than a girl taking a date for a free dinner. Hap 2. I did piercings, but my friend was an artist at the shop we worked at. Had a girl come in, no ink, no piercing. She wanted to get, no joke, daddy's girl as a tramp stamp. She was in tears moments into the tattoo, like hysterically. She suffered through altogether probably 25 minutes and walked out with girl right above her waistline. 10 out of 10, hilarious. The other was a guy. He had a few small tats on his arms, nothing crazy. He was also one of those, I watch the UFC and wear tap out, don't mess with me types. He wanted a pretty large tribal chest piece, collarbone to collarbone. He was told that we recommend a couple of sessions. Them tats hurt. And this is a lot of outline and a lot of shading. He insisted no, that he could sit through the pain. He ended up fainting towards the end of his outline. I worked there for roughly a year after and he never came back to get it finished. I don't tap out, I just faint. Not a tattoo artist, but my friend tells this story that I had to share here. He just went to the pharmacy to get some prescriptions filled in North Carolina. They tell him it's going to take about an hour to fill and to come back later. So he walks out of the strip mall and the next place over is a tattoo shop. He goes in and asks for a random tattoo. They tell him it's going to take 15 minutes to do the drawing and 30 minutes to tattoo it on him. He asks what they can do right now instantly and they tell him that they can pierce his nipples. Within an hour, he gets both his nips pierced, a pretty sweet tattoo, and his prescription filled all in one regular Tuesday afternoon. Not the worst client, but just an unfortunate event. The apprentice at my shop who had only been tattooing for a little under a year was tattooing this girl's wrist recently. Her first tattoo, the word undefeated. Gets the tattoo, it goes smoothly. She likes it, she walks to the lobby, shows her dad, he likes it too. Walks back to get bandaged up, gets bandaged, they walk back to the counter. As he's explaining aftercare, she blacks out, falls back, hits her head on a giant painting hanging on the wall, an Ed Hardy original. The painting falls and glass breaks. He runs over, picks her up and is checking the back of her head. He realizes a giant piece of glass has punctured her shoulder/trap. EMTs come, tell her she needs stitches, and they end up having to take her to the emergency room where she gets 6 stitches. The next week, the girl brought him a giant tub of cookies. She wasn't the worst, but it was an incredibly unfortunate experience for the both of them. His first time having someone pass out and her first time being defeated. That last line killed me because I forgot that the tattoo said undefeated. People who caught their significant others cheating on them without them catching on, how did you respond? She started by confessing that he kissed her while they were watching movies at his place. I voiced my assumptions that she should stop hanging out with him after that, but she got mad, defensive, and refused. When I look back, there's no question that that was the moment my marriage ended. But I loved her, so we did the dance for a few more weeks. She promised to stop talking to him, but started spending an awful lot of time going for drives. One night she fell asleep in her car, and another night she was at the airport having a Cinnabon at 3:30 a.m. The capstone came when she was out having dinner with her sister while I stayed home with the baby. I opened up her laptop to order a pizza and found her browser pointed to real estate websites. Oh lovely, they're shopping for a house together. How quaint. Well, time to put a stop to this. I called her sister, hey, wife's phone must be dead. Can you hand her the phone? Pretty straightforward, and her response wasn't at all surprising. Huh? What do you mean? She's not here. Oh, sorry, I must have mixed up my days. Have a good night. Click. So I called up my wife and made idle chat. How was dinner? How's your sister? How's your sister's boyfriend? Hope traffic wasn't too bad. I let her lie to me for a couple of minutes. When she asked what I was up to, I said, me? Oh, I'm packing your things. I called your sister and you're not there. It's time for you to come home. That was the second of 3 times I kicked her out before it finally stuck. I'm now happily divorced 7 years. She was at the airport having a Cinnabon at 3:30 a.m.? Literally the worst excuse I've ever heard. What the freak? Yeah, that's pretty bad, but I will at least give her some credit for trying. My ex would always just go with, my battery died, or I went to sleep early. Survey says that was a lie. This was my first marriage. Caught him by an obvious breadcrumb trail of late nights, plus long cell phone conversations seen on the bill. I responded by telling him I knew that I didn't want to hear any BS excuses and he was to end it immediately in one last phone call to her or we were done. 8 years of marriage at that point. I gave him 6 months and he still hadn't put her away. So I hit the lawyer and gymmed up. Honestly, I was a little relieved to have an excuse to leave him. Our daughter says he still talks about how much he regrets losing me. He's been remarried 5 years. What a jerk. Ouch. That's terrible that he is using your daughter like that. Divorce sucks for children. Parents making it worse like that drives me nuts. Don't talk bad about the other parent, and don't make the child part of your dating life. Seem like 2 easy rules for everyone to follow. I should note, obviously children should be involved in future long-term relationships. The people who introduce their kids to a series of short-term flings, ugh. After confirming my suspicions, I put his phone back in his bag, woke him up, asked him where he was last night, and he straight up told me the truth by saying, "With her." I told him to get up, get his crap, and get out. And so, he did. I'd been suspicious for months, but put it out of my head because the homewrecker was a supposed close friend of mine. Went right under my nose both before and after our wedding. She snuck off during my bachelorette party to hook up with him. Finally, I just read his text and it was all laid out right there like a crappy romance novel. Confronted him and he was pretty nasty to me, as if he had any right. But I wanted to keep my hands clean during this whole ordeal, so I kept it short and civilized. The only revenge is living well. The divorce was smooth after a whopping month of being married, and now I'm happier than I've ever been. You're a better woman than I. If I confronted someone for cheating on me with a good friend, going so far as to screw her at my bachelor party, and he had the nerve to be nasty about it, I'm not a violent person, but I can't see myself not hitting him or at least verbally abusing him. Thanks for the kind words. I know I had every right to be furious, but in the immediate aftermath, I took civility almost to a fault. I was so floored by the whole situation, not to mention what most people would think about such a quick divorce, that I wanted to be sure there would be absolutely nothing that came back to me and made me look bad. The anger I did feel at first was directed at her, because it's so much easier to blame the mistress, you know? I may have clawed her eyes out had I seen her after I found out, but after all was said and done, I went through the sadness and anger, and within a couple of months there were so many doors opening in my life that I couldn't help but be glad things turned out the way they did. And now it's been over a year and I look back and I'm glad I didn't pee in his floor vents or anything, because honestly, he simply doesn't matter anymore. I hate to say it, but I do usually take the high road in a lot of situations, but I will say, sometimes that low road does seem fun in the moment. I drove off, went to where they both worked since I had left my car there earlier that day. Saw them making out in her car. All I could do was stare for a few seconds and had to will myself just to leave. It was that moment that I knew I lost her for good. We hadn't talked since. It's been 3 months. While my girlfriend showered, she invited me to watch Netflix on her computer to keep myself occupied. Google Chrome displayed her frequently viewed pages when it opened up. One of those pages was a Craigslist personal ad. English was her second language, so it was pretty easy to find her ad when I got home that night. I replied. She wrote back and we texted back and forth with my burner phone. I suggested a rendezvous at an upscale bar. I got there 10 minutes early, showed the bartender a picture of my cheating girlfriend, then tipped them $20 and told them to bring her a pina colada when she arrived. Oh, and make sure you give her this too. I had bought an MP3 player and loaded it with Escape, the Pina Colada song. She broke up with me shortly thereafter and never alluded to my ruse. Oh man, I'm sorry about your crappy ex-girlfriend, but I read up the lyrics to that song a few weeks ago. This is perfect. That song is so effed up. It's basically about 2 people who have a bonding experience over simultaneously catching each other actively trying to cheat on one another. Yeah, that's a relationship that's gonna work out. I thought the same thing. I've listened to that song so much growing up, and I always thought the people in it were dumb. My wife asked me to walk her mom through some computer stuff and handed me her phone. Heard the text message alert hit before we hung up and casually checked if I got off the phone with her mother. The message said, "So, you love me now?" It was from her boss. I went mentally numb. Didn't mention it right away and waited for her to fall asleep. Got her phone and tried to open it. To my surprise, there was a lock code. I woke her up and asked her for her lock code. Told her that my phone had died and I wanted to play a game that we were both playing. She immediately wakes up and starts in on how she knew I was going to do this, and starts telling me how paranoid I am. She nuts out on me and calls her mom to let her know that I'm a lunatic and accusing her of all kinds of things, which I hadn't done yet, but now I'm pretty sure I know what's up. I tell her to go ahead and prove that I'm crazy and put in her lock code and see who the lunatic really is, along with who's the cheater. She puts in the code and several more messages from her boss pop in. Turns out that she was cheating after all. There were signs, but I tricked myself into ignoring them earlier. I left that night and I've never thought about going back. My wife left a few months ago. In hindsight, I think she was having an online affair with an old boyfriend that decided to turn into a real relationship. I guess I didn't really do anything directly in response. She was gone by the time I admitted to myself what was going on. But recognizing what was going on helped me move on from, I'm a horrible husband who wrecked my marriage, to she was a horrible wife who walked away from a good marriage as soon as times got tough. And it's helping me feel not the slightest bit of guilt as I fight to protect myself during the divorce proceedings. I was always the wage earner, and at this point, if the divorce leaves her penniless and homeless, I don't give a crap. She made her bed. Truth be told, I put a lot more into that marriage than I ever got back from it, so good riddance. It's crazy how getting out of a relationship can make you reflect on things. I always thought I was a good boyfriend, but after a while I thought maybe I was a bad one. When I talk about some of the things I experienced in my past relationships, people always tell me that my ex was extremely toxic and that things she did were not normal in relationships. At first I had suspicions. I was out of town and I looked at our cell phone bill, which I never do, to see how many peak minutes we had left for the month. That's when I noticed that she was spending hours on the phone, but never when I was around. She told me that it was a former colleague of hers that had moved to California and was injured in a motorcycle accident. She was never apathetic towards anyone. She would have been better off telling me that she was kicking kittens or belittling children for sport. This went on for a couple of months until she started volunteering at work a lot more. She was a teacher, so it was pretty common for her to have after-school activities. Besides, I was in evening college classes, so it didn't really feel like anything had changed. I mostly felt for our dog, who would often bear the brunt of her not being around. Eventually, she started being really selective about where she kept her phone, even though I had never gone out of my way to check up on her. Curiosity got the best of me, and one morning while she was in the shower, I found her phone and saw the text messages that read, "I hate when you leave. I love you." I'll never forget the feeling I got while reading that. After this, she began getting more creative where she hid her phone. My personal favorite was under the seat of her car. Even knowing all this, I confronted her pretty much daily and was met with absolute silence. That was far more hurtful than knowing that she had cheated. The day after Christmas, she decided to drive out of state to visit her family, with the guy she was seeing, I later learned. She updated me on her travels about halfway through the drive. I called her to warn her that there was a major storm where she was driving, and to be careful. She didn't respond, and I didn't hear back from her for almost 3 days. That was brutal. I had honestly come to terms with the fact that I would be receiving a call that she had been in an accident. I had even called her family to ask if they had heard from her. She finally showed back up at home on New Year's Eve. By this point, there was nothing to salvage of our 10 years together. She kept telling me that she'd file for divorce to end the misery, but I think she actually thrived on the misery she and I felt. She yearned for me to react to her actions. She became more egregious about flaunting being with the guy, even going with him to places she knew my friends would be at. As my grandma always said, it's time to crap or get off the pot. So I filed for divorce and moved on. I made it a goal not to fight over division of assets or belongings, which irked her even more. In the ultimate show of her senselessness, she demanded to get the house and I happily complied. Then the housing market tanked and she was stuck with a mortgage on a house worth less than half of what she owed. After it was over, I learned that he was a janitor at her school. She got pregnant before my side of the bed was even cooled off, and he had cheated on his wife to be with my ex. I got my revenge by living well after it all ended. I graduated from college, then law school, met and married an amazing woman, and we have a son now. It was painful at the time, but in hindsight, she did me the biggest favor in the world. When I was reading this, I felt like this guy dated a girl I dated years ago. My ex also thrived on making me feel miserable. She would do the same thing of saying she was gonna do something and then not respond for the whole night or the next day. She flat out told me to my face that she liked making me upset for fun. I finally came to the realization that she was a horrible person when my grandfather passed away, and she was just so cold and had no empathy about the situation. After a year or more of suspicion and shady behavior, his ruse was blown when a friend of mine also knew the other woman. She was hearing both sides and deduced that we were talking to the same dude. Arranged for both of us to meet at her house. Explained our stories and figured out he was playing both of us. I ended up calling him and telling him I was standing there in the same room with X, Y, and Z. He hung up on me. It's been done ever since and caused a lot of heartache for the both of us. It took me a while to heal from that. I got home from work early, spouse in bed with 2 large women, our son sleeping close by. Locked eyes, saw the oh crap look, picked up my son and his bag, grabbed all the clothes on the floor, and went to my mom's. I have no idea what they wore home, but nothing of mine was going to cover that tonnage. It's probably not the same scenario you were looking for, but my ex-girlfriend accidentally confessed to cheating me 3 years after she dumped me. I got all sorts of reasons why she wanted to end our multi-year relationship. She just left out that she was screwing someone else. By this time, the same guy was her fiance. So here's what I did. I sent her an email. The exchange went like this. Hey, is it okay if I email you here? Wow, hi, yes, this is good. Are you okay? Well, not really. Based on your Facebook post, can you explain how your anniversary with new guy is in January when you dumped me out of the blue on February 6th? Oh, that's not really our anniversary, but we're both so busy. I didn't start dating him until shortly after our relationship was over. He's not the reason why our relationship ended. I miss having you as a friend more than you'll ever know. I waited a few weeks, then forwarded the entire email exchange to her fiance, let him figure out why that wasn't their real anniversary, why he wasn't the reason we broke up, and why she misses me as a friend more than I'll ever know. I bet it's more than he knew too. I did something like this once, kinda. I was dating this girl and she started being really weird. I rushed into dating her after a long-term relationship, so I let a lot of things slide. I decided to message her friend to see if he knew what was going on with her. I told her this the next time we hung out and she freaked. Turns out, after we broke up, she revealed that she was hiding 2 kids from me. And that friend was the baby daddy. I sure know how to pick 'em. Late to the party, but I really want to share this. So my BF and I had been together for about 2 years. Great relationship, no problems. This was my first real relationship, so I was in heaven. I was at college out of town for about 2 months when I went home to visit. I was planning on going to my BF's house that evening. A friend offered to give me a ride there. On the way, she pulled into a parking lot and broke down crying. She had something awful to tell me. She was dating his neighbor/friend at the time and had overheard my BF saying that he was getting it on with this girl at work and how cool it was to get a blowy by a girl with a tongue ring. I was devastated, but hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Got to his place and he wasn't home yet. She went to her BF's house and clearly let them know I knew, as they all gathered on the front porch with drinks waiting for a showdown. I should say that this was before cell phones were common, so he had no way of being warned. He gets home, he runs to me and swings me around all lovey-dovey, very romantic style. I fern happiness. We sit on the porch a few minutes and I begin to give signs that I was ready to show him some affection. We head to the bedroom, things start heating up, I slowly undress him, taking my time, get on my knees, grab his little buddy, look up with my bedroom eyes and whisper in a devilish voice, "Should I get a tongue ring since that's what you really like?" The look of pure fear will forever be etched into my brain. I wish I could say I did something awesome as he was still in my hand at the time, but in reality it was just a massive explosive verbal fight after that. Of course, I was fully clothed, and he, anxiously, was undressed the entire time. Found the Plan B receipt, and moved the freak out while she sat on the couch threatening to end herself. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My boyfriend and I had been together for a couple of years before I found out. He was a lot more careful hiding it from me at first than he was later on. I knew before we were together that he had a couple of 3-ways with his best friend and his best friend's wife. What I didn't know was that after it got awkward, he and the wife had got together while his best friend was at work, and while I was at work when me and my boyfriend were still dating. I eventually found out one night while he was sleeping beside me because he left his Facebook logged in on my computer, and I didn't even notice it until a message from her popped up. It was a response to a message that he had sent her telling her how much he was in love with her, and how he had brought a pair of her underwear in his suitcase on a vacation he had just returned from with his parents. She was wondering when they could meet up again. I was completely destroyed. I ran to the bathroom and threw up and shook for the rest of the night. I couldn't sleep. I'm shaking now as I type this, remembering and having tears in my eyes. I couldn't get over the betrayal. This is someone I plan to spend the rest of my life with. We lived together and we were talking about getting married soon. I scrolled through some of the previous messages, and the two of them had been messaging each other a lot. I alluded to the messages the next day without letting on that I knew, and he denied everything. I let it stew. He left his Facebook logged in on my computer several times in the months following, and there weren't as many messages for the following few months. But then they started up again, It was absolutely devastating. Anytime I would confront him about it, which got more direct, his response was pure denial, and he would turn it around on me somehow, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Eventually, I couldn't take the deceit any longer, and I ended up leaving him. I felt like the situation was killing me. I was a wreck, and I was getting further and further into substances to numb myself from it, and my depression was getting exasperated by it. The whole situation killed my self-esteem for a very long time. I am still in love with him, and I always will be. I know how stupid that sounds, but sometimes you really can't help who you fall in love with. He actually didn't see anyone after we broke up, until he died almost a year later. I constantly think about how I wish things would have gone differently, and long for a life we were trying to build together. Damn, I was not expecting the boyfriend to die in that story. But part of me thinks that maybe the reason why the OP still longs for them is because maybe they thought they could change or fix the person if they tried harder. In reality, some people just suck and you can't change them. Even though it hurts, it's best that you moved on. I didn't really catch her cheating, but all the signs were there. Before she graduated college, she was hired at a doctor's office as an assistant and would work late hours. I kind of expected this because I knew the medical professions consume a lot of time. I started to notice that she would spend more and more time at work, which started to get suspicious. About 4 or 5 months into her being hired, I knew something was up. She would go to work at 6 a.m. and then not come home until midnight some nights, saying that I had to drop off medication at a patient's house, or I went to the 9:30 workout class, both of which didn't make any sense because I called her coworker and asked when the office closed, 7 p.m., and when the emergency staff started, 9 p.m., and if she was a part of that staff, which she was not. Secondly, I went to the same gym and the latest class they had was at 7:45 p.m. The second sign was how distant she had become in the relationship and how protective of her phone she got. Normally, she wouldn't mind showing me pictures or texts on her phone, but she increasingly became overprotective. She would also refuse to sleep in my bed. She was one of my roommates at the time. After we both graduated, I finally decided enough was enough and it was time to confront her. She denied it, of course, but at this point in the relationship, I didn't feel a connection with her anymore and our love was dead. The night before I broke up with her, my roommates, including her, and some of her friends, some of the dudes, all went out for drinks. Everyone got completely wasted and we were all a big mess. What I remember from that night is wondering where my ex-GF went and where one of her guy friends went. Well, as it turns out, she was feeling sick and had to leave the bar. Thankfully, her guy friend was there to take care of her. When everyone decided to leave, one of my more sober friends got everyone together, but couldn't find my ex-GF and said guy friend. We started a search party and eventually found them with her head in his lap. Now, I barely remember this, but my friend said she wasn't going to town on this guy, but resting her head on his lap. He could have been telling me the truth or just trying to avoid a fight from breaking out. Regardless, I broke up with her the next day. The head on the lap thing seems probable, but all the other things the OP lists were definitely grounds for the breakup in my opinion. Went home instead of work, gathered all the clothes I really liked, my consoles, and anything I could think of that wouldn't be missed. When she went to work that night, I grabbed all the things that would be missed, including myself, and left. What's a telltale sign that someone is a selfish person? When conversations don't feel like conversations. They are one-sided talks about what they want, their thoughts, their life, their priorities, etc. When you are able to actually slip in a word, your words are used as transitions in their dialogue. No matter how you format your words, they all just add to the plot of that person's story. What you say and what you do are pawns in their game to be manipulated in a way that belittles your experiences, your actions, your opinions, and your choices. Something I personally want to add to this is most selfish people can't have conversations. I've noticed this with the girl I used to fool around with. She would try to make conversation by making it about me with, "What are you doing? How was your day?" But no matter what I responded with, it always got a 1 to 2 word answer. "That's cool. Interesting." That way they give you the illusion that they care, when in reality they just use you when they need you. They gladly take any favors you do for them, and when asked if you could reciprocate once, they get defensive or aggressive, and act like you're the selfish one for daring to expect something in return. It doesn't make you a bad person to expect reciprocation in a relationship with someone else, romantic or platonic. Relationships are give and take, and it makes them healthy. It's not entitlement to expect kindness if you give kindness. If you're the only one giving, you're being taken advantage of. And for clarification, for anyone who thinks doing something kind with the expectation to gain something from it can be manipulative, I'm not talking about narcissism and manipulation. I'm talking about the natural give and take in a relationship. It's not manipulative to expect certain things out of a relationship. Depending on the kind of relationship that is. The whole reason we make relationships is because they give us something, whether that be support, love, safety, or other advantages. It isn't a bad thing, it's a human thing. Typically with give and take, if you notice a pattern of one person consistently taking without giving, the one taking is the problem, not the one giving. The kind of people who use this as a manipulation tactic aren't the ones who stick around in a relationship for years, doing favors and kind things without being asked to. They're more than likely to do one favor and demand twice as much in return. Why do I know this? I've had these people in my life, which is what gives me the realization I'm commenting here. Yeah, I'm actually going through this with my roommate. She always asks for my help, expects me to walk her dog every day, constantly asks me to pay rent in advance even though I'm not getting any income for 3 weeks. Yes, she asked me to pay a second rent just a week after the last. She never thanks me for walking the dog. Any advance payment? No thanks there either. She'll just keep asking as if I'm her bank account and then get angry when I'm unable to pay. Last week she asked me to cook extra food because we had guests coming over and she threw a fit because I used beans. It's not that she or anyone else can't eat beans, it was just her dislike of the day. She had eaten those same beans and other dishes and liked it. I had put so much effort into cooking more food than normal and her behavior was worse than usual. I have completely stopped helping her or even speaking with her. That sounds like my ex-wife so much. Did plenty for her. Would do anything she wanted to do even if I wasn't thrilled about it. But when it came to something that I wanted, she never seemed to have time for it. I eventually got to the point where I wouldn't even try to mention anything I wanted or liked. I put plenty of thought into gifts for her, but if I ever got something, it had no thought put into it. Basically got to the point where I felt selfish for even wanting anything. Took me a while to accept that I wasn't the problem or the selfish one. Eventually, I realized through help from a therapist that it was straight mental abuse. Relationships take compromise. When anything that happens to them is the worst thing in the world, and whatever happens to you is not that bad and a waste of time to talk about or even deal with. I know your mom died a month ago, but my best friend of 3 years died too, so I don't see why you're so sad all the time. I think narcissism and selfishness go hand in hand, so there you go. A friend of mine was talking to a mutual ex-friend about how she was feeling crappy because it was coming up on the anniversary of her sister's murder. The ex-friend responded that she was also feeling crappy and needed support because her boyfriend, who had been visiting for the weekend, had gone home. We both cut her off after that. After my sister's husband passed, a friend said, "I know exactly how that feels. My husband is in the army and goes away for months. But said husband comes home, can email, video call, and most of all, is not dead." She's now an ex-friend to everyone. I'll admit, I've caught myself doing the I know how it feels thing with friends before, but it's usually because I've been through the same thing. However, I've never tried to pass off a death of someone being on the same level as missing a partner that went home. That's just dumb. They feel no remorse for how they've hurt others. They don't think that they're wrong in the slightest bit. They can't shoulder any bit of responsibility. Look, it's not my fault that you can't do anything right. Very well then, I'm sorry you don't understand my point of view. You can't forget the classic, "You just misunderstood what I said. I didn't mean it like that." My former neighbors were bad alcoholics. Every night is a Friday night and weekends are like the new year. The police were constantly getting called to their house. Their kids not only destroyed their property, but other people's as well. Their junk was always thrown all over multiple yards. Their landlord ended up evicting them. My neighbor was pissed and fought hard in court to stay because they paid their rent via assistance. It was everyone else's fault but theirs. It was the landlord's fault for being biased against them. It was the neighbor's fault for complaining about their kids. It was their parents' fault for not helping more. Everyone was to blame, but not them. All I can say is it's been peaceful since they've been gone. They don't remember the times people have helped them, but remember clearly all the times that they helped others. It's easier to remember when you can count the number of times on your fingers. They bring nothing to the potluck, but are the first in line. Dude, screw these people the most. If you don't bring anything to the potluck, you better at least be cleaning up after the party. They respond how worse their situation is when you're sharing problems with them. They don't try to help or listen, they just draw attention to their side. Ah, the complainers. I have a friend like that, and lately I've just been letting her talk, with dry responses such as, "Oh wow, tough luck. Yeah, you've told me all of that via text." And I would talk only if she asked me a question. Well, the hangout got silent super fast. And it seems she is no longer satisfied sharing the details of her life with me. Noise. I once had a friend who would just complain all the time about everything, never really doing anything to fix the problems, and if she did, she'd still complain about it. One day I tell her that I want to be her friend, but our conversations were always so negative, and couldn't we just talk about some more positive things? The whole dynamic of the friendship changed, and she straight up just stopped talking to me, saying, "I don't know what to talk to you about anymore." That admission, tied with her inaction, blew me away. We drifted apart and are no longer friends. I've actually done this with friends before as well. I've often been told that I give the comfortable vibe, where people can just talk to me about anything, which is nice, but I also have a problem solver brain, so when I have friends that complain about the same thing all the time and don't try to improve after my advice, I just lose interest in those conversations because they're meaningless at that point. Like, I understand venting, but if the bad smell doesn't leave the place after a while, something might be rotten. If you are in a group and there's that one person that is constantly interrupting the middle of what you or anyone else is saying, generally to brag about themselves with a one-upper story, that's a precursor to stop associating with them. I've met too many of those people in my day, and they are more often than not happy to throw you under the bus whenever the opportunity arises. If they always talk about themselves, I know many people that will not shut up about their day for an entire call, then just leave you when you start talking about yours. Likewise, but some people just aren't aware that they're doing that. I've politely mentioned that to a couple close friends, and they've been way more aware about their behavior since. Life isn't binary, and good people might have bad habits without knowing it. So trying to help them is my way of thinking. By the way, your mileage may vary, of course, hence me saying some people. I think it depends on the situation. I have a lot of friends that I keep in touch with via voice text messages or video text messages. Since these aren't real conversations because we respond when we can, both parties usually end up speaking about their days after quickly responding to any questions. They have that superpower that leads everything back to themselves. Even when you're actually talking about your own life or a specific problem of yours, they somehow make it that you start talking about them instead, without even changing the topic. Nearly everyone does this to a point. There's an extremely fine line between trying to comfort someone by saying something like, "I recently went through something with my father as well. I'm so sorry," and making their issues about yourself. It's crazy how common it is. And I guess if you are sharing something tragic to a group of people, at least one will try to make it into a competition and one-up you. I'm so nervous sometimes that people think I come off as the above comment, when I just want to say that I relate to you, not that it's about me. Sometimes just saying, "Hey, that sucks, I'm sorry," seems disingenuous. So saying, "Hey, I've been there and I know how much it sucks," sounds more genuine, I think. Conversations can be weird. They refuse to take responsibility for their actions. Similarly, someone who never apologizes. It takes a little longer to figure this out, but if after a few dozen hours of interactions, you've never heard "I'm sorry," you probably never will. I waited 4.5 years once. Never again. This is one of the main things I look out for when I might be interested in someone. I pay very close attention to how they act when they make mistakes or do something that has accountability attached. If they sidestep it every time, I know to cut them off at the knees. Complaining at work to coworkers doing your work for you while you complain. When they want to dig up your dead dog to use the skull for taxidermy purposes and is insistent on doing it despite your objections. They never admit when they're wrong, even if there is physical evidence. "Well, I'm sorry that you have a problem with me. Maybe you should stop being so sensitive. Why are you making that face? I literally just apologized to you." I wonder if this is everything it appears to be because I work with the dude who has a medium autism, so we look after him and he doesn't work. He's definitely not selfish. He'll go out of his way to help people who are more vulnerable than him and always puts them at ease and gets them to open up, interact, and basically have fun and feel safe. But you can't get him to stop talking about himself or his interests. It's all football, running, oh, have I told you about running and football? Harry Potter and that time 9 years ago when I accidentally farted? If you didn't know he was autistic, and it's actually not as apparent as you might expect, you probably would wonder why you can't get a word in edgewise. From an autistic perspective, that's probably the biggest compliment he could give you. He feels secure enough around you to talk about his interests and know that you're not going to dismiss him or make him feel bad for being excited about them. He'd likely appreciate if you gently spoke to him about keeping in mind that other people would like to talk about themselves too and their interests. And if you work together to find a balance that meant that he didn't feel ashamed, but also you could get a fair amount of speaking time in the conversation. Rejection-sensitive dysmorphia is a real issue for some of us, so make sure it's clear you're still interested in hearing about his stuff. I will say, once I learned a little bit more about autism, I definitely questioned if people have it or not when I have certain conversations. Mainly online. With some of the autistic people that I have talked to, their attention to detail is insane sometimes. So much so that it can cause them to overthink a situation. For example, I was talking about comic books with this one autistic person, and they were dead serious about some errors in comic books having a significance in the book, because there was no way the company would allow that to happen. No matter how much I explained that these things happened, they just wouldn't change their mind. So I definitely take this into consideration now instead of thinking everyone online is an idiot or thick-skulled. They're surprised and disgruntled when you accept what they offered. Example, I used to be friends with someone who loved to offer stuff. I have some cute maternity clothes that would fit you. I can lend them to you if you want. I can help you rearrange your classroom. I'll come in early tomorrow. I made such a great apple pie. I can bring you a piece. These aren't things that anyone solicited. She offered them up, yet 100% expected that everyone will politely decline her offers. I'm a yes person. Anything you offer to me, I will happily accept. The look on her face when I would respond, "That would be great, thanks," was always priceless. She would never follow through with any of it, but she never stopped offering stuff, and I never stopped accepting. It was kind of hilarious. When they always play the victim card, 99% of the time, they only place themselves in the victim seat by ignoring all the efforts or costs of other people that they've had to endure and only focus on what they've had to go through themselves. I know this all too well, and when you call them out on it, you usually get hit with, "What do you mean? Where is this coming from?" Or my personal favorite, "This is all too much for me right now." Cliche answer, but I found the returning the shopping cart test to be pretty accurate. It is such a small thing, but it does tell you if a person thinks small things like that matter. This is my favorite armchair measuring of a good person. There is absolutely no benefit to you as a trolley returner, but there is a loss to other people if you don't. There's also no immediate human association like how you treat a server or retail employee. Just raw, are you thinking about the other guy? For me, it's people who listen to TikToks in public, especially in relatively silent places. There's a guy that hangs out at my favorite bar. Doesn't talk much and keeps to himself, but he sits for hours watching videos on his phone with the volume on. It's the most obnoxious thing ever. Bartender finally told him to turn the volume off or just stop watching. He was 100% oblivious to the fact that no one else in this place wanted to hear that crap. Why does it make a difference if it's a TikTok? Make it loud anything. When using your mobile on public transport, I think you should not even have key sounds. It's bad enough people don't deactivate those. Also, listening to a soccer match or whatever without bothering to use any headphones is just pure evil. I was so confused for a bit by that last comment when they said keys shouldn't have sounds. I was like, damn, you want people to silence their house keys? That's some insane entitlement right there, man. Then I realized they meant keyboard keys. My ex was insanely selfish. Her dad gave her a $20K a month allowance, plus paid for the mortgage of her penthouse in New York City, while she went to Yale. He paid her car plus insurance. She had zero need for cash. All bills are paid. He also gave her a credit card with, I'm assuming, no limit, cause we bought a car once on a whim. But I saw her steal $3 from a friend who was passed out. She'd steal panties from Walmart. She had a pile of cash in her bedroom. We once needed to pay for a delivery. I don't know if it was a bagel or pizza, but she refused to touch the pile of cash. I had to walk to my car to get cash. And when I tipped the delivery girl $10 for waiting, my ex went ballistic, calling me a bee, a moron, and queer. Cause why would you give that random porky bee $10 for $5 worth of food? We went to a celeb wedding. She found a way to take 4 gift baskets as opposed to the 2 we were supposed to get. Every guest got 1. She also stole a $500 gift card to Victoria's Secret from the wedding. She was wicked greedy. One of my workmates had her drink taken from the fridge by someone else. When she put a sign up on the fridge to remind people not to take things, another guy asked her why she was doing it. She explains that her drink was taken, and without skipping a beat, he said, "Oh yeah, that's because someone took mine." So not only admitted to doing it, but his justification was that someone did it to him. So yeah, I'd say that. This is what people call paying their dues. Other people treated me poorly, so I need to perpetuate that to somehow justify it being done to me. If you don't have the same hardship, then somehow it's not fair. This is embedded to so many aspects of our society and has got to be some form of evil. The paying your dues comment is so true. At my old job, all the lifers would be so mad that I wasn't busting my balls doing extra work that wasn't in my job description. I'm not getting paid to do that extra work, so until I am, get someone in a higher position to do it. They would claim, "Young people don't know how to work anymore." Look, Grandpa, I'm sorry that I just don't bend the knee and do whatever my employer tells me to do. If the higher ups can get bonuses each year, they can afford to pay me to do more work. Trauma dumping and then not reciprocating if someone else had a bad day or felt comfortable enough to open up to them. When they go out clubbing or something and bring their friends back home to continue the party at 2 a.m. However, he lives in a share house and his roommates have to go to work in the morning. Ever since I told him to break up the party and that isn't appropriate, especially since he didn't mention to anyone that he decided to have a 2 a.m. Wednesday night party, he complied, but ever since then he's been unpleasant and unfriendly with me. Jerk. The more they ask in a relationship, the more you're having to give. That is, I think of relationships like a bridge. Generally, you should build from both sides, and in crisis you make up the difference. But a friendship is primarily meeting each other in the middle. Selfish or self-centered people pretend to build a relationship, but ask you to build the relational bridge all the way toward them. Ultimately, they expect you to build the relationship entirely towards them, and you're left giving more than receiving. When they are unable to see beyond their own needs and feelings and aren't capable of recognizing that they're impacting the people around them in negative ways. Another sign of a selfish person is when they're driven by only self-interests and don't care about how their actions might affect others. People who have kids on purpose and then act like their kids owe them, well above and beyond basic kindness and human respect, for the rest of their lives. They throw other people under the bus so fast that you get whiplash if you stand too close. Whether to save themselves or to humiliate the competition. No self-accounting at all. I love these threads. I always use them as a way to measure whether I'm doing those things or not, and fix them if I am. Made it about yourself, haven't you? You got me good. I'll end this video with a quick selfish person I used to be friends with. This guy was a master manipulator. He would reel you in with his charm and nice guy persona. He straight up offered me a chance to go to a comic convention I had always dreamed of going to. I joined his friend group, and that's when I noticed the little things he wanted people to do. He would ask people, "Are you gonna be doing this? While there, can you get this for me?" Or, "Hey, can you do this and I'll meet you there?" All these things seemed harmless and everyone helped him out because he was a nice guy. But everything was done to serve his own needs. I ended up having a falling out with this guy and was basically kicked from the friend group. Turns out everyone was extremely confused on why I was kicked out. But I found out later that he was saying some of the most messed up crap about me to this group. And basically anyone that would listen. Luckily, one of the girls in the group called BS because she was always suspicious of this guy. Months later, he kicked out another guy in the group, and that's when the girl said, "You should reach out to OP and see what really happened." We ended up getting breakfast and we kind of just said everything that was going on. Turns out this dude was bad-mouthing everyone behind their backs and was using everyone to gain something. We had an older lady in our friend group, and he would use her to jump lines at cons because she had disability access to get into things. This dude was the ultimate scumbag, and the last time I checked, he was dating a girl who, oddly enough, enjoys waiting in lines and has a history of being manipulated.
What stories do you rarely tell because nobody will believe you? I'm a living witness to something known as the McMasterville explosion. CIL, the paint company, made explosives. Their explosives factory, which was a giant factory on the same grounds as the paint-making factory. One night, the whole thing blew up. I was looking right at it when it went. Not just the explosives, but thousands of gallons of flammable liquids from other parts of the factory all went up at once. It was estimated to have the power of a 1 kiloton explosion. I lived on the side side of a mountain called Mount St. Hilaire, a little over a mile away looking down at the factory site. When you see an explosion like that from a distance, the land ripples like water, like when you drop a stone in water. I was riding a bike. The ground shook me first, then the air blast knocked me on my butt. The factory was deliberately sunk into the ground and surrounded by a high trench wall in case it ever blew up so the nearby town of Beloil wouldn't get leveled. So the explosive force got punched into the ground and the factory was blown straight up into the air. Tons of wreckage rained down for miles. No one I know of was hit by anything, but many small fires were started all over the place. My next door neighbor found a train wheel in his backyard, and it was red hot when he found it. Apparently, this occurred in 1972, and at least 6 people died.
That my father was arrested for stealing $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses, and during his time in jail I found out that he was not my biological father. My biological father owned a chain of restaurants that I frequented as a kid and teenager. I found all this out a few weeks after my 18th birthday.
What would you even want with $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses?
I was 6 years old and my parents took my family down to Disney World. Yay! On the flight down, the pilot made an announcement that if you looked out the window, you could see the space shuttle launching. It was kind of far away, but I could definitely see it in a plume of smoke. Very cool. We land in Orlando, and everyone is dead silent, glued to the TVs. It was the Challenger, and it exploded on launch. I saw the Challenger explode.
The 28th of January, 1986. I faked playing a xylophone for 2 years so I could go to China once. I played trombone for 8 years through middle and high school, and I knew a few people at my college before I went there. They convinced me to join marching band, but were always complaining that the band director wrote impossible drills, 10 counts to move, 30 yards in some instances, run through the bass drums, that sort of crap. I, being the genius that I was, figured, well, I played keyboard in a ska band for a couple years. How hard could xylophone be? Xylophones don't march after all. Answer: xylophone is pretty goddamn hard, and I'd never played one in my life before the first day of band camp, which is when the auditions were. The guy doing the auditions was the percussion instructor for the College of Music, and after my audition, he told me to put the mallets down, step back, and never play xylophone again, which, to be fair, I did butcher the crap out of hot cross buns due to some sort of administrative mess-up. They never got around to actually kicking me out that year, and I hung around and pretended to play the xylophone. Now, every 2 years, my college's marching band takes a big trip somewhere overseas to perform and yada yada yada, and I had entered on an off year. The second year, I show up and do the same thing, except the percussion instructor has been fired. I never really dealt with him beyond defending him with my ability to butcher xylophone music, but to my understanding, he was a general butthole and the music department had been wanting to chuck him out for some time, so they made a big stink about him doing some paperwork incorrectly or something. So it was left to our section leaders to audition the section, and being good friends with the section leader, he just said, "Jenkins, hit something every now and again, but not very hard and make it look like you're playing," so that's what I did. I found the softest mallet in the place, barely tapped the keys, wham, bam, going to China. Everything would have worked out peachy. Except our band director also didn't pay any attention to the orchestra pit. So when he was doling out parts for the music we were going to play in China, he assigned me to concert bells. Like that tiny little 50-pound xylophone that has a sound that would cut through an aerial bombardment. Not only that, I had a solo at the beginning of The Moon Represents My Heart, which, as it was explained to me, is basically Somewhere Over the Rainbow for Chinese people. Everybody knows the song. It's a cultural treasure and not something you want to mess up at a national landmark, because folks will notice. So I busted my butt actually learning how to play that bit over the span of a couple months and managed to avoid offending the people of Shanghai and Beijing. Not all the people, though. A group of Chinese youths caught me urinating into a bush in Shanghai's club district, and I had to duck into a place called Highway 3 with my dinger still hanging out to get away from them. Got to play a set of concert bells on the Great Wall and see a whole bunch of stuff in China, though. It's ridiculous to me that seemingly no one who was ever in charge of this marching band really had any clue what the hell they were doing, or what was going on really with this band. When I was 19, some friends and I were visiting New York City. After picking them up from the airport, we decided it would be fun to drive down Broadway at night and see it all lit up. It was fun. We got some good pictures from the car, and around 8:30 we decided to drive home. Going northbound on the West Henry Hudson, we were talking and listening to some Journey when someone hopped the highway divider and ran out in front of my car, stopped, and looked right at us. There was no time to stop, no time to swerve, and at 50 miles per hour, he came crashing straight through the front windshield, hitting my best friend directly in the face. Immediately, I pulled over and called the police, then went to look to see if there were any slim chances the man might still be alive. I saw his legs swerved roughly 4 to 6 inches above the knee and on the road near where my car had stopped. My friend in the back seat was crying her eyes out, and my buddy was amped up on adrenaline and shock in the front seat waiting for the police to arrive and remove him from the car. Walking further back, I saw a bunch of people who had stopped to help crowded around the man. I saw his head caved in and a dark pool underneath him, before a kind old gentleman turned me away, saying, "You don't need to see this." In almost no time at all, the fire department was there helping my friend who had a broken nose and shards of glass embedded in his eye and face out of the car. When the ambulance arrived, they tried to pull him in with the man I had hit, which made him freak out and refuse and wait for another ambulance. The cops on the scene took down my story and ran a breathalyzer on me, but I hadn't been drinking. At this time in my life, I didn't drink. Then put my friend from the back seat and I in the back of a car to try and calm us down while they waited for the investigators to arrive. I had called my mom, who lived outside the city, to tell her I had been in an accident and that she should come for support. After about an hour, the investigators arrived, took time marking off the scene, and interviewed us again about what had happened. The police were very nice and all of us were in shock. After interviewing me, I asked the investigator where I could go to the bathroom. He nodded to the trees on the side of the highway and said to have at it. So I stood on the dimly lit bloody highway near the trees and under the watchful eye of the 50-block traffic jam I had created, and let forth a stream I had been holding for hours. Afterwards, they took us back to the local precinct to finish paperwork and meet up with my mom and sister who were waiting there, after having left my stepbrother with my friend who had been taken to the hospital. They had gotten lost and caught in the same traffic I caused, which is why they didn't meet us at the scene. With the paperwork done, my mom asked what had happened to the man. The officer looked at my little sisters and then asked my mom and I to step outside. It was DOA. He had been released from prison that morning. I was shocked when he extended his hand to me and thanked me for helping to clean up the city. After going to the hospital to get my friend and stepbrother, we went home for the evening. The next day, when we picked up my car from the auto shop, I saw the meager sunlight, the after image of what had transpired, blood and brain matter all over the front of my car, an imploded front windshield, and entering the car to take it to a place to get the glass repaired, a large chunk of bloody skull in the passenger seat next to me, hidden under some napkins. My friend who had been in the passenger seat wandered over and I told him not to look inside, but he wouldn't listen and did anyway. I think that is when the reality of what happened sunk in for him, because his eye grew large and he turned around silently to go sit in my mom's car. The entire experience was completely surreal, especially during the drive to get the windshield repaired when alone I drove the car to the shop, the wind whistling through the broken glass. I want to believe that when the cops said, "Thanks for cleaning up the city," the guy who died was maybe just a real piece of work and did some awful stuff, but maybe this dude is just completely indifferent about this stuff, which is pretty horrible. My other thought is that this individual also enjoys creative writing. TLDR, almost had a knife to my brain because of some crazy quack doctor leaping to very rash conclusions. Don't you hate it when doctors jump to conclusions? I know I've posted this somewhere before, but anyway, I was 10, lived out in rural America where my closest neighbor was a football field's length away. Between us was an overgrown field that backed up to my neighbor's horse pasture. I used to run through the fields full blast with weeds and grass stalks and wildflowers that were taller than me. I didn't give a crap. So one morning I wake up and something isn't right. I have this horrible pain in my neck. My neck! Oh God, what happened to my neck? My neck was swollen to the point of it jutting past my chin. It was like a 350-pound person's neck on a little 90-pound girl. I screamed. Mom screamed when she saw it. We took off for the pediatrician right away. Of course, as fate would have it, my usual pediatrician wasn't in that day, so a stand-in was there. I remember very mild tests going on, nothing too crazy, before the doctor explains to my mother that it's a brain tumor and I'll have to have brain surgery right away. I am freaking out. And my mom isn't too calm either. She, however, rationalizes, and before she makes her plans to have them cut into my skull, takes me to her own doctor for a second opinion. The RN at that office peers at me for a minute, performs a few other mild tests, and then goes, aha, and lifts up my ponytail. She points at this small bump on the back of my neck and proudly exclaims, spider bite. 2 days rest and some penicillin and I was 100% again.
That was a pretty crazy conclusion to come to after it's like, well, when did the lump show up? Just this day. Then again, what kind of crazy spider bite was it? Around the age of 12, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. I struggled with it so much that I had psychiatrists say they could do no more for me. A therapist that made house calls, and I've even participated in studies, evaluated on the other side of a one-way mirror kind of stuff. Perhaps in desperation, my parents eventually sent me to a psychiatric hospital halfway across the country which specialized in the treatment of OCD. I was there for 3 months until my insurance ran out. Now I'm 22 years old and I've overcome it so much that nobody besides family even realizes anything is/was ever wrong with me. With all these people running around saying I'm so OCD, I eat my M&Ms one color at a time, and them not knowing me back then, I don't even bother divulging a part of my life they would be unable to comprehend the severity of.
You know, I totally get that. As someone with ADHD who used to get support of it when I was a kid, and I used to see these people and they'd say to me things like, so, is your ADHD better now? Is it gone yet? And I go, well, I don't think it works like that. I absolutely hated those memes, but my point is those issues, mental disorders, learning difficulties never really go away. You simply learn to adjust your life around it and behave accordingly in certain situations, and people often don't talk about that much.
I'm late to the thread, so this'll probably get buried, but hey, I feel like telling the story. It's a bit spooky. Hopefully someone will find it a good read. My mom and I moved into a completely normal/average house when I was about 15. Everything was fine. We loved it. One day I was home sick from school and I was messing around on the computer when I heard our garage door open. I freaked out and went down the hall to get my mobile phone and saw the hallway door that connects to the garage opening. I panicked and yelled, "Get out!" and 2 young boys slammed the door and ran off. I started crying and called my mom. I don't know why I didn't call the police first, who told me to go next door to my neighbors and she was going to come home from work. When she got home, she was speaking to my neighbor for a bit. She, the neighbor, ended up telling us that she thought it was probably the young boy that lived in the house before us. Apparently, he sometimes goes around to everyone's houses and breaks in and eats their food and watches TV and stuff. And for whatever reason, they were all okay with that. Apparently, he came from some sort of broken home and they all felt sorry for him, so they didn't call the police. Mom and I were completely unsettled by that and put new locks on all the doors that week. We didn't care if the other neighbors were okay with that. We weren't. A few months pass and nothing ever happens again. We figure he knows we're not cool with his weirdness and doesn't try to break in again. A week or so later, I'm in bed asleep and I wake up in the middle of night for no reason at all. I'm not hot or cold. I don't need to pee. I didn't have a nightmare. I just woke up. I had this incredibly uneasy and weird feeling wash over me. I felt like something or someone was watching me and I got completely freaked out. I went into my mom's room and slept in her bed that night. It kept happening a few nights and I thought I was just having nightmares or was getting scared of the dark for some reason. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed for about a week because I got so legit scared of the dark now. I finally worked up the courage to sleep in my own bed one night, but I could barely sleep. I felt totally uneasy, nervous, scared. I got to sleep for a bit, but then I woke up again. I looked outside my window and I could swear I saw a face/figure of someone standing there. Obviously, I noped the hell out and ran back to my mom. One of the nights I was back in her bed. We were all asleep and feeling fine when I woke up to my dog on the end of the bed growling. Now, our dog is an old golden retriever and has never growled or barked at anything. She is a huge wuss and completely placid. She has no problem with strangers, even if someone knocks on the door and comes in. She couldn't care less. So I wake up all dazed, confused, and half asleep. I hear the dog growling and I'm asking her, what's wrong? I look up from the bed and I'm not lying to you, there is a man standing in the doorway with a knife. I screamed like a banshee and the dog started barking at this point. Mom woke up and saw the man too. He went running down the hallway and out the back door. I'm crying my
eyes out. The dog is barking her face off and Mom is frantically trying to call the police. An hour later, they finally get here and of course, the dude is gone. Morning comes and we go outside to see that the back gate has had its lock cut with bolt cutters and the door leading into the house had been smashed in. The cops come in and dust for prints and leave crap everywhere, but at the end of the day, they can't and don't do anything. We moved out that same day and went to live with my grandmother and grandfather until we found a new house. Pretty much no one in the family believed us or thought we were just making it up for attention. My family are buttholes. A few weeks later, we get a call from the police and they managed to match the prints to some teenager who just got arrested for breaking into another house. It's the same guy that was breaking into all the houses in the neighborhood and used to live in the house we were in. So Mom's talking to the cops and some of the neighbors when suddenly someone tells us completely casually, "Oh yeah, that's the Millet kid." Wait, did they just say Millet? Yeah, pretty much any Australian will know this last name. Ivan Millet, the serial killer. His nephew was breaking into people's homes and our home while we were sleeping with a knife, and people were okay with that. So anyway, we move into a new house and forget all about it until a year ago. Millet's nephew gets 43 years jail sentence. He and his friend murdered another teenager in the same goddamn place his uncle dumped all those bodies. WTF. So, the guy that broke into our house watched me while I was asleep and stood in our bedroom doorway with a knife while we were sleeping actually murdered another teenager a few years later. Mom and I nearly fell over when we heard about it. No one really believes us, which really annoys me, but it really happened. Sometimes when I think back on what could have happened if I slept in my own bed that night, or if the dog didn't bark, or if we were never woken up, it really freaks me out. It's also left me with a huge fear of the dark. I get really uneasy if I have to go outside at night by myself or if I wake up in the middle of the night. Well, goddamn, I'm English and even I know who Ivan Millet is. But that is a legitimately terrifying story. I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville from 1999 until 2002. While I was there, I worked for record labels, as did a lot of friends who were all in the music business program. Well, one buddy worked for a label called Red Hill Records as an intern/gopher/indentured servant. So on occasion, we could go to events and meet industry people and artists, as this was a small label. They had an artist that we became friends with named Katie Hudson, who was a singer-songwriter at about 17 years old. We hung out all the time since we were just 18 ourselves and had nothing to do but study and bum around coffee shops. As our friendship developed, my roommate developed a huge crush on her. She never seemed to reciprocate the feeling, so I asked her what was wrong with him. You know, trying to be a good friend. And she revealed that she liked me instead of him. So, since I wanted to be a good friend, I had to turn her down because of his feelings for her. That girl went on to be Katy Perry. I kid you not. I suppose that's pretty impressive. I'm not really a Katy Perry person, but good for this guy. And while I'm not going to read them, some of the follow-up comments are pretty cringe. My friend's father owned a Mercedes CLS when I was a senior in high school. One day when his father is gone, we take it out. We have some ganja in both of our grinders in the cup holders, which was freaking stupid. We always put that stuff in the trunk. As we approach a downsloped hill near our school in the most cliche manner possible, he decides he wants to show me how fast his dad's car can go. The road was narrow and the slope was pretty steep downwards, but went right back up after it reached the bottom. He books it, and by the time we reach the bottom of the hill, we're probably going 90 miles per hour. Right at the bottom, we pass a cop, like frickin' fly right by him. He turns his lights on and tries to turn around, but one or two cars gets between us and him. The road was so narrow that he had to do like a 3-point turn to get all the way around. We start to frickin' panic. I have no idea what came over me at this point. Only about 3 seconds after we see the cop, but seeing that it took him so long to turn around made me look at my friend and say, "Keep going." We go to the top of the hill, still going fast AF, take a right, go about 100 yards and take a left into a neighborhood. We go down a random driveway in a cul-de-sac park and turn the car off. We chuck all of the ganja materials out of the car and slump down in our chairs, peeking back. We see the cop go around the cul-de-sac and leave the neighborhood. I swear to God, it was like the goddamn Italian Job. Never been so scared in my life. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. My mom thought Paul McCartney kidnapped me. My mom was walking with me on the beach in the Hamptons when I was an infant. McCartney came up to my mom and asked if he could hold me. My mom was in desperate need of the bathroom and didn't want to go inside with me, so she asked if McCartney wouldn't mind watching me for a few minutes. Apparently, I started sobbing, so he paced up and down the beach and my mom couldn't find me when she came out of the bathroom. She called my dad and they spent 2 hours looking for me before they found McCartney sitting on a bench chair with me in his arms. I don't care if the baby's crying. You stand exactly where I left you with my baby. If someone trusts
trust you with their baby. You don't move an inch. This may get buried and not be as interesting as some of the others, but I have one that nobody ever believes. When I was in 4th grade, I was completely obsessed with Chuck Berry. I mean, religiously obsessed. I still am to a certain extent, but that was back in the day when I was first discovering rock and roll. Well, as fortune would have it, Chuck Berry came to my city to perform at the local venue. He must have been in his 70s at this point. I was beyond excited, so of course, my mother, being the caring and loving parent that she is, bought tickets and we went. The whole entire show, I was in the very front, and then I had an idea. I didn't know if it could possibly work or not, but there was a pause, and I went for it. While Chuck was tuning his guitar, I started yelling, Mr. Berry, to my absolute bewilderment. He leaned in from the stage and with a huge grin on his face asked me, "What's up, little buddy?" To which I replied, "Can I please sing Johnny Be Good with you?" Holy crap, he says yes. I'm a 4th grader on stage at a huge venue with the father of rock and roll about to sing one of his most famous songs with him. He starts the opening riff. I'm shaking, but not from stage fright. No, it was from sheer shock of being in this situation. I start singing. The crowd erupts. I bellow out the song. At the end, Chuck asks me, "What's your name, young man?" I tell him my name. The crowd starts cheering my name for a solid minute. It was the most incredible feeling and hands down the best gift I've ever received. Now, personally, I'm more of a fan of Maybelline, why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline, why can't you be true? You just started doing the things you used to do.
What traits in girls do you find attractive or impressive aside from physical appearance, guys? My wife's laughs are literally everything. Sometimes she watches a show on her laptop in our room and I hear her cracking up from down the hall. I absolutely love it. One of the main reasons I started dating my current girlfriend was because she accidentally spilled popcorn in my car after our first date. She profusely apologized and asked if she could clean it up. My car was a POS, so I didn't care. When I got home, she texted me apologizing again. I don't know why, but her caring about spilling popcorn in my crappy car made me realize, hey, maybe she could care about me too. Aw, she spilled popcorn into your heart. Ah man, I had a similar situation except I was the spiller. 3rd date in a city on a sunny afternoon. Coffee all over her light blue jeans and she just laughed it off. I knew then she had an amazing outlook on life. We got engaged last week. Gotta love people that don't let spilled milk ruin their days. Shows a lot about their character. Accountability. If she can openly admit when she's wrong or that she messed up, that's attractive, as it shows maturity and the ability to judge yourself impartially, and it means you are less likely to repeat the mistake. This also means that you feel for her if not only love, it's respect, which is just as important. Wow, this is fantastic. I've dated girls in the past who would never just say, "I was wrong, I shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry." I get that it's hard sometimes, but it's relieving to admit wrongdoing and ask for forgiveness. But when you obsessively chase not having done wrong in the first place, it's actually a tax on both parties. I 100% agree with this. I'll take it a step further by saying when you text or call a woman and she doesn't answer, but later says, "Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't respond, I got caught up with insert reason here," instead of just saying, "I was busy," it shows that they respect you enough to let you know that there was a real reason they couldn't respond. This is nice because they don't owe you an explanation of why they didn't respond, but them doing so shows an amount of caring on their part. Things like confidence, a good sense of humor, intelligence, all of that is super important. But for me, the sexiest thing a woman can do is be calm. Not calm as in quiet, as in calm when crap goes sideways or something unexpected happens. Having someone who is reliable and stable as a partner is so crucial in life. I didn't realize how attractive that sounds until I read it. To not have to burn calories on dealing with my partner and the situation, that's so hot right now. It's probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from my father. He explained that when every possible thing goes wrong, the last thing you want is a partner that makes it even harder by panicking, getting angry, or making things worse. Plus, the tenacity, toughness, and resilience, it's freaking sexy. Don't get me wrong, I love taking care of a lady as much as the next guy, but when a girl just buckles down and solves a problem in a cool, collected manner, man, that's an instant spiritual and physical boner. Spiritual boners are some of the best boners. I'm loving this thread. My wife is baseline stressed and an anxious person. She's always doing a lot of stuff for her career and taking on way too much. So I feel like the calm caretaker a lot of the time. However, in times of crisis, she locks in and is such a calm and collected source of comfort. I had one horrible disc herniation a few years back that resulted in such bad pain I was writhing and screaming in agony. She called an ambulance, explained what was happening, and made sure I was sorted. She called my parents, handled them, and made sure everything I needed, I had. She was an absolute rock star. I can't describe how grateful I was and how taken care of I felt. From there, we sort of realized that the day-to-day maintenance I'm better at, but in times of crisis, she's second to none. I'll never forget that though. I never felt so loved and cared for in my life. Anxiety can be a superpower. It's the fear of the unknown that affects the anxious. So you're constantly worried about what's going to happen and thinking through different scenarios in your head, etc. Then when an emergency happens, you just lock into problem solver mode because you run through these drills in your head 1,000 times before. It's awesome that you guys found each other to balance things out. As someone who has been diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety, I can confirm that when crap hits the fan, I'm on my toes and ready to handle the situation. Not exclusive to girls, but having a hobby or interest that they are very knowledgeable and passionate with, that's great. Even if it's something super benign like painting their nails or baseball, I just love people who can ramble on about their interest, especially if I'm not into it. It's like peeking into another world. Knew a girl that was into knitting, but not just like I knew how to cross stitch. Full on had a setup where she would turn wool into yarn and even had a favorite small sheep farm that she would order from exclusively. She was interesting as hell to me. Exactly. So many times I'll ask a woman, hell, this applies to men just as much, what does she do for fun? And it's almost always scrolling through social media or Netflix. I'll rephrase the question, asking about any sort of active or creative hobbies they do when they aren't relaxing. And it's like they don't understand the difference. You're not wrong that there are a lot of people that spend their free time doing those things, but also in my experience, many people's minds seem to go blank on the specific question. I'm not totally sure why though. This is weird, but I've had success with asking this question. Pretend you have an unexpected week-long staycation starting tomorrow. What are you going to be doing this week? Then they'll tell you about projects, art, home improvement, pets, and things that they've been working on or wanting to get a chance to do. Or maybe they just don't and they're actually not interested in anything other than TV and social media. Either way, you've learned something about them. Critical thinking skills are hot. I would adjust this to curiosity. Curious people who investigate, inquire, and show genuine interest often use critical thinking as a byproduct. I say this impresses me in anyone. When managing people, if I have a curious employee who wants to know why something works the way it does, or wants to find a tool or technology to improve, they are always earmarked for career investment. In women, finding a curious person means that you will be able to find someone who will likely not bore you over the long haul, because curiosity as a personality trait means that she's the type of person to engage in things that are important and keep away that every day is the same creep that tends to infiltrate a relationship. And for clarification for those who say, well, dumb people can be curious too, I think those are missing my meaning. I mean more intellectually curious, and less, what does this electrical socket taste like? I find a woman's voice to be one of the best factors in determining if I'm attracted to a woman. Do you mean like accent, pitch, tone, all of the above? All of the above and what she says. A woman can look stunning, but in opening her mouth she reveals who she truly is. To know if a woman is intelligent, funny, angry, depressed, or even sexy, I don't need to see, I need to hear. Above all else, as a man, I try to listen. The second best advice I ever got about dating was to get the other person to talk, to ask leading questions. The first, of course, is to make them laugh. And a woman's laugh will reveal so much about them. Authenticity and genuine character do not look anything like I've ever seen, but I can hear them. Here's the answer I was looking for. I was a phone hookup operator for over a decade. I initially went into it because random dudes would just go nuts over my voice all of the time. I'd call in for customer support on my phone and the tech guy would ask for my number, and things like that. I still sell my voice for a living, but not in the hookup industry anymore. My clients are all women now, but even though they aren't attracted to me intimately for the most part, I still get comments on my voice. Tons are surprised by my age too. I'm 46, but I still easily sound like I'm in my 20s. I can confirm a nice voice will win me over quickly. Same goes for nice eyes and a good smile. Intelligence. Good looks only go so far when you realize she doesn't even know basic life skills. If they can't have an interesting conversation, then why would you want to spend years with that person? I understand if you're looking for a short-term physical encounter. However, if you are looking for a long-term relationship, the ability to communicate is paramount. 100% agree. The girl I dated before my wife was hot, like smoking hot. Her hobbies were basically working out and eating like a rabbit. Hands down the most physically attractive girl I ever dated. But that was it, nothing more. She never had anything interesting to say, never had an opinion on anything, never laughed at jokes or funny movies. She was just a void of personality and took no pleasure in the joys of life. I eventually had to break it off. Now my wife, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. She's beautiful, but she's just a normal human. She's the funniest person I know. She knows what's going on in the world and is driven to make it a better place. And most importantly, she's been extremely supportive of me, and she's the one person I know I can talk about anything with. It's like having a best friend that I can play no-clothes games with. Years ago, I had been dating a girl who was getting a degree in neuroscience. Even though I wasn't a scientist of any sort, I loved talking to her and listening to her go on and on about the brain and the central nervous system. Not only was she smart, but she was passionate and interesting. We split up when I moved to Los Angeles without her. One night, I was at a bar with a friend, and I was talking to a girl who had moved to LA to be a singer. I asked her something like, "So, you're a singer, eh?" And then this girl responded by launching into a full-voiced version of "I Will Always Love You" in the middle of the bar. In that moment, I vividly remember thinking, I miss my neuroscientist. 2 weeks later, I took a plane to the East Coast, called her up and wooed her from her new boyfriend. She moved to SoCal and got her PhD in neuroscience. We got married and have 3 awesome children. She still blows my mind when she talks about her work. I find women that are the complete opposite of me hella attractive. Not sure why, but at least on 3 separate occasions, I have been attracted to nurses that I knew and were friends with. I want to make movies and write comic books, so we're totally opposite. But with one of these women, I remember it like it was yesterday. We were driving to a show to watch a band in another city, and on this hour-long drive, she turned sideways in the passenger seat, like her back was against the passenger door. Probably unsafe even though she was still wearing her seatbelt. And she just looked at me and listened to me while we were driving to this show. It was one of the best freaking interactions I've had with a woman because she just felt present in that moment. Went on a date last week and the woman never took her phone out of her purse. Super hot. If she doesn't take her phone out of her purse, how is she supposed to show you 300 pictures of her cat? How they treat themselves, self-care, how they treat others, friendship, how they work with others, collaboration, what they enjoy learning, curiosity, and what they enjoy doing, creativity. Intelligence, confidence, self-awareness, empathy, creativity, education. Also being pet-friendly is a big plus. So basically anything you'd like from a decent human being. Being emotionally intelligent and mature, which includes having kindness and empathy, etc., can go a long way as it shows me that you're capable of being a decent human being towards myself and others, and that you won't be someone that I have to be careful around. Bonus points if I get the vibe that you're a chill person. Enthusiasm, boundaries, responsible for herself, allows her to be challenged in her thinking, enough backbone to keep me honest when I'm wrong. Being self-sufficient. I don't want to date a dependent. When my wife and I were dating, one of the things that made her stand out was that she was totally self-sufficient. She didn't need help, nor did she expect it. We dated for almost 2 years before making the decision to move in together, and that was mostly on confluence of circumstances. She wanted to live on her own because it was freedom for her. Man, I feel that. My wife is completely self-sufficient. She's better educated and makes more than me. She does not need to be with me, but she is. And it feels great that someone who doesn't need me chooses to stay with me. Being with an independent woman is super hot because you know for the fact that she doesn't need you at all. So knowing that she is with you because she wants to be is super hot. Bit of a simple one here, but I love when a girl can sing. My wife claims that she can't carry a tune in a bucket, but when she sings, it's beautiful sounds to my ears. And I feel I have a responsibly good judgment on vocal quality. When we have a couple of drinks, I get my guitar out and can occasionally convince her to sing a few songs with me. It's one of my favorite things to do. The same traits I look for in my best friend. General vibes need to be on point, thoughtful, kind, sassy. I'm perfectly happy single, so my partner needs to add to my life and make sure our time together is more valuable than my time alone.
If she's got a dark sense of humor. I like women like I like my chocolate Easter bunnies. Dark, bitter, and with a gnarly hollowness inside that can never be filled.
Someone with equivalent levels of apathy and laziness, but about areas of life that complement my own apathy and laziness. That way one of us will always let the freaking dog out or put the kettle on. But I don't feel too guilty for saying Sofa Saturday. I'm not getting dressed. Been married 16 years. Perfect. I'm not a guy, so I don't count. But I like when girls are genuinely kind and have good banter. Like you can be cheeky and funny and a little sassy, but I still like a nice girl. I've always been attracted to those kind of girls in the room. I can agree with this. I like a woman that can get along with my male friends. Also my female friends, because if she can't, that's a red flag. But I don't want her to be one of the boys like many guys say they want. I want her to be her own unique self. I want her to be the reason I don't want to be around my boys all the time. I saw a girl riding a fixed bike in the city and doing bunny hops with the bike at the intersection to stay upright. I had only just started riding my bike again and I was just so impressed with the skills. Optimism. I'm a bit of a pessimist at times. I fall into nihilistic thinking a lot. Good to have someone who could look to our future with a positive light. Adventurous. Being willing to put yourself at risk of humiliation, danger, or failure when encountering new activities is attractive. I will say I definitely like an adventurous woman, or at least someone who wants to plan out and try new things. I often get lost in my work, and it's nice to have someone to invite you out to do things. When I dated my ex, the one thing that constantly made me fall in love with her was just her ability to just get excited to talk about anything. I loved seeing her just get excited about either the littlest thing or whatever was on her mind that day. Enthusiastic or interested in me. That is so reassuring to have. Also, for her to have some hobby or activity, whether it be tennis or an instrument or Dungeons and Dragons or theater. Something she's passionate about would be nice. If her principles and values are similar to mine, it's a way to minimize unnecessary discussions and keep harmony while enjoying each other's company. When she's not afraid to get her hands dirty, kill a bug or two, or unclog a toilet. I'd like to add, and she likes to wash her hands after. It's exhausting to be in a relationship with someone who constantly requires reassurance, praise, and affirmation. Know your worth, and if others don't recognize it, move on and find a relationship with people who do. I understand what you mean, but keep in mind that praise, affirmation, and reassurance is absolutely something that everybody needs and wants. I'm sure there's some experience behind your comment, but it's about finding a balance between knowing your worth and being with someone who empowers that understanding. For some people, their own worth is easier to understand with a bit of outside help. There are a lot of traits that I find attractive, but the one I absolutely love is bravery. And by bravery, I don't mean just doing outlandish things and acting foolish. By bravery, I mean brave enough to confront what's wrong, brave enough to acknowledge her mistakes or shortcomings, brave enough to take on challenges and negative situations head on. I will never date a girl without all of these. Number 1, friends. Number 2, well-defined interests or hobbies, preferably ones that involve more than just looking attractive. I'm talking even simple things like their own established favorite music, movies, etc. And number 3, something equating to a career or career goals. I don't care if it's school or working in customer service at an office or rising up the ranks at a retail store, but something with intent. And frankly, I think most of the things that other people are saying in this thread, things like confidence, intelligence, sense of humor, etc., are all easier to find in people who have these 3 things. They're basically just cornerstones of having an actual independent personality. Basically, I've dated far too many women whose entire personality, self-worth, and motivation are simply being a girlfriend. Sometimes I just feel like I like everyone. My standards are almost non-existent. If I spend more than a few hours every day for like 3 weeks with someone, I'm at risk at falling in love, because I don't do that crap for anybody. I had to address this same situation today actually. I had to tell a girl that I'm friends with that I needed some distance because goddamn, we were talking a lot and I started catching feelings. Man, I don't like that. That's some scary crap right there. Girls who like sports, and not in the name the 1986 World Series champs. Just like to shoot hoops or play in the rec league or play pickleball with some friends and throw the football on the beach or something. That's hot. The ability to be one of the guys. I like a cute, pretty, pampered princess as far as the looks. I'll admit I'm a sucker for an innocent girly girl look.
but I'd rather have someone I can take out on insane adventures and go do stupid crap like fireworks or play video games and swear at each other while we make hookup jokes. Just that comfortable personality where I don't have to impress her and I could just be me.
I get the understanding with the be one of the guys things, but do you ever think these guys just want to date their guy friends? If a girl has a talent or a skill that took time and dedication and still interests them, it's incredibly attractive. Like if I'm not physically attracted to someone, then I find out that they play bass guitar or super into making pottery or something, they instantly become very attractive.
Any girl who can calculate the homogeneous linear second order differential equation with the regular singular point would make me melt in a second order solution. The last 2 girls I dated had one major thing in common. The first, we were having a discussion, a friendly argument about philosophy, and she was holding her own. Then I said something, don't even remember what, and she said, "That's not even close to what the book says. You know, I have it right here. I can take it out and prove you wrong." I had a boner so hard that I had to look away and think about my grandma. The second, a jokingly silly argument, which I tend to be good at. She won, I had no rebuttal. I love girls who are smarter than me, and they have the balls to prove it. That's just so hot. As someone else said, critical thinking is fantastic, along with being secure with herself, emotionally stable and independent. I'm so over the fragile, clingy girl that worships me as a means of seeking validation. No, I'm not being cocky in saying that. Anyone who has been there knows it's less about me and more about the other party seeking what they're missing, and being discarded for the next shiny object that's likely to come. The ability to hold her ground in a debate and push back and not fold in conversation when her heart knows that she's right. A girl who has balls is hot.
Hey, yo! What's the worst damage you've caused? I myself may not have caused that much material damage, but a friend of mine told me the other day how one late night he drove a van into a parking garage in a hotel in Barcelona and got stuck under the roof. Upon reversing the car, all of the roof tiles on that level came down in a chain reaction. They buried all the cars that were parked on that level. Obviously, nobody could leave the next morning, which resulted in a lot of compensation claims for missed flights and business meetings, besides all the damage that was done to the garage and many cars. It took a bunch of lawyers and insurance companies 4 years to get it all sorted out. There was a house for sale in my neighborhood that was empty for about 3 months. During that period, a group of friends and I pushed a huge freaking boulder into the deep end of the swimming pool. To be clear, it was poised right on the edge, begging to be pushed. Fast forward after a few months, a friend not involved in the incident tells me that his dad just bought a new house. Only downside is the new house has a boulder in the pool. Oops. Your friend's dad has terrible taste in real estate. He lives in a goddamn boulder stuck in a pool? I erected a tower crane with the base that was improperly engineered. 2 months later, it fell, collapsing one building, damaging 2 others, killing 1 man, injuring the operator, and shutting down the job. I think the ballpark financial end was around $20 million in damages, and it's all undisclosed. I wasn't the reason that there was a failure, but that damage was ridiculous. Trip to Spain with my high school. Beer plus dishwashing soap plus giant fountain in the middle of a town equals chaos. They closed the 4 main roads the next day. They brought in a fire truck from a neighboring town just to clean up the bubbles. Local newspaper blamed it on American tourists. We were Canadian. It freaking blows me away that nobody has done this to the Grand Haven musical fountain yet, which is the size of a football field. On a side note, I did this to our hot tub back when I was a teen, and then blamed it on the neighbor kid. Freaking bubbles everywhere. Clear out to the driveway. Took about 5 times of draining the hot tub to get all the bubbles to stop. I live in GH, and I'm sure it would be absolutely crazy if done right. From what I've heard though is that they have guys up by the pumps when the show is going to keep an eye on things. I'd imagine it would be difficult to pull off successfully. Actually, it would be very possible. You are right. We do have someone on the hill and someone in the stadium. If someone were to dump soap in it, the show would still go on. It has only been canceled like 3 times in 48 years of operation. Plus, we would most likely not notice the soap until it was too late. The nozzles aerate the water too, so the bubbles would be out of control. It just blows me away that no pranksters have tried this. But I am glad at the same time because cleanup would be hell. I think I've done this in my sink when I wash dishes. When I was 11 or 12, I went to visit my sister in Germany. We were getting ready for a dinner party that she was throwing later that night, so we were busily getting the final items we needed at the local market. It was a bit hectic. As it was a little market, they only had these tiny baskets for all of your stuff, and no carts. So she asked me to hold a bottle of champagne. As we were waiting in line, I was being a stupid kid and trying to balance the bottle on the punt, the little divot on the bottom of the bottle, on one finger. Naturally, I screwed it up and dropped the bottle. Anyone who's ever dropped a bottle of champagne knows those things explode with force and a lot of noise. This, in a foreign country, is embarrassing enough as is. But then this guy next to me cries out and collapses on the ground, clutching his knee. Blood is squirting all over the floor and making a big pool. This lady starts screaming and I just stand there not knowing what the hell happened. Turns out a shard of glass had got under the guy's kneecap and severed an artery and some ligaments. He ended up having to go to the hospital that day and have surgery. The cherry on top? Dude was a mountain climber and he was leaving to climb the Matterhorn the next day. My jaw was literally left open after reading this. I think I would hate all children if this happened to me. I used to work at a major appliance warehouse in the summer, and during my first month as a forklift operator, I came around the corner too sharp. The clamp of my lift caught the edge of a refrigerator. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The entire stack, about 60 feet high, of 10 $1,000 fridges came crashing down on top of my lift and into a subsequent stack of dishwashers. I was terrified. As the second tower came crashing down, I could hear employees screaming, "Oh no, oh no, oh yeah!" And all the other lift operators came out to watch and laugh at the damages. I proceeded to take the walk of shame to inform the damages manager. Rather than fire me, we all took hunting pictures of me holding up dead dishwashers. Estimated damage, $20,000. I've always thought you have to hit those shelves pretty hard to cause that much damage to knock them over. I used to work at a big warehouse store and these things are usually bolted to the ground. Also, one of our shelves even had a huge dent in it and it didn't fall over. Not sure how that was allowed to fly, just for safety reasons alone. My little brother and I saw someone make and use a Molotov cocktail in some action movie. We thought it would be the coolest thing ever and determined that we could do the same thing and be little action heroes. Our first attempt yielded disappointing results. Somehow, we neglected to realize that bottles had to be made of glass. Once that was sorted out, we tested our new creation on a big oak tree in the clearing about a mile into a forest behind our house. The bottle full of gasoline exploded just like we expected and burned that 100-foot-old oak tree down in less than an hour. We were amazed, but soon became terrified when the flaming limbs began falling off the tree and setting fire to the tall, dry summer grass nearby. The fire quickly spread to nearby trees and we did the only thing we could think of to do: run like hell. That inferno burned for about the next 48 hours until the fire department could finally put it out. It destroyed about 40 acres of forest land, an abandoned house, a part of a horse farm, resulting in some freaked out horses and lots of charred fences. Naturally, we never came forward because we were cowardly little jerks. But we both went to volunteer for fire departments wherever we lived to atone for our stupidity and carelessness. In high school, we used to go out to my friend's farm and attempt totally awesome fire-based destruction every weekend. Our experiment with Molotovs began with my friend setting his jacket on fire by pouring fuel down the back while he was trying to throw one incorrectly. Being set on fire helps people learn. I can't say that I ever messed with fire when I was younger, outside of the occasional fireworks, but when I hear stories about people doing stuff like this, it just makes me wonder, where the hell were your parents? I accidentally blew up a 6,000-gallon tanker truck and demolished the workshop we were in. Damages amounted to about $120,000. Go on. I worked for a company in England that built and repaired tanker trucks. A 4-part compartment truck came in one day for the pipework to be replaced on the rear compartment. I had been told that the tanker was clean and vapor-free, safe to work on. I got under the rear of the truck to cut the bolt head off the bottom connecting flange with an acetylene torch. As I cut the last bolt, the flange gap opened up about 1/8, and a ring of flame came out. Before I had time to react, the rear compartment blew up, which blew out the division into the next compartment and that exploded. All 4 compartments went off within milliseconds of each other, and the front of the tanker blew up and destroyed the truck unit. Luckily, the driver wasn't inside.
The top of the tank opened up like petals of a flower and the whole truck jumped in the air. The explosion took the roof off the top of the workshop and the supporting wall that the truck was parked next to. I was actually in the safest place, which was underneath, although I did have to change my undies. Turns out the tank hadn't been cleaned and had just came from dropping off a load. I needn't tell you that that was the last time we ever accepted a vehicle without a vapor-free certification. My father once sold a tanker truck that exploded during a pressure test. Killed a guy, sent shrapnel flying into their brand new test building. He was livid, and he couldn't figure out how the tanker exploded at 10 bar. Turns out the guy who bought it decided that he could get the truck all the way to the test center so it could bring him a few extra bucks, and he used it to deliver gas in a nearby test center. He didn't empty it with water afterwards. Gas plus oxygen equals bang. My friend worked in a seaweed concentrate factory. One of their machines is a big centrifuge, and one day, while spinning really fast, it decided to disintegrate. The machine exploded into 100 fragments of steel, which flew off into random directions, punching holes in the warehouse walls, and one embedded itself in his locker as he was running away from the carnage. Some folks are just lucky. This was one of my biggest fears when I used to work at an old automotive factory job. We had a lot of dudes that didn't pay attention to their test stands, and at any moment something could break off and cause serious damage. I experienced a couple of fires while I was there. Luckily, we caught them in time. When I was in the 6th grade, I caught a dried up tobacco field on fire. I had a knockoff of one of those Rambo knives, and for a few days I was high on the thought of being an action hero with nothing but my knife, and all the crap stuffed inside the handle. I was trying to show my sister how I could create fire with using just 2 sticks. When she wasn't looking, I snuck out a match and started a small fire, blew out the match and tossed it behind me. Of course, while we were staring at my small, deliberate fire, flames were rapidly spreading all around us. This was right off a busy highway, and suddenly there were folks all over the place swatting the fire with their floor mats. In the end, a huge chunk of the field was completely charred, and to this day, my entire family believes I was able to accomplish all of that by rubbing 2 sticks together. When my brother and I were 4 and 5 respectively, we were being little devils and refusing to go to bed when we were put there. My parents eventually gave up and just went to bed. They were exhausted as they had a dinner party that evening. I promptly went into the lounge and got out my parents' entire cassette tape collection, including the memoirs of my grandmother's escape from Germany in 1939, and proceeded to pull out all of the tape from the cassettes and play with it. My brother, in the meantime, decided that he was hungry and that he wanted a fried egg. In his 5-year-old wisdom, he got out an egg and a frying pan and put them on the stove and turned on an element. Nothing happened with the element that he was looking at, so he turned on another one. This time the heat turned on, and once the pan was hot enough, he started to fry his egg. Unfortunately, the first element he turned on had a wooden chipper board on it, which smoldered until the heat reached my mom's food processor, which promptly started burning and melting. This resulted in a lot of black smoke and fire. My brother toddled down to my parents' bedroom and said, "Daddy, why isn't there smoke in the kitchen?" And apparently my dad went from horizontal in bed to vertical and halfway down the corridor in about 2 seconds flat. The fire was quite easily put out at the expense of my parents' nice crockery that was soaking in the bucket nearby. My dad just picked it up, threw it, plates, water, and all, on the fire. In the photos of the damages that had to be taken for insurance purposes, there's a sort of twisted black mess of a stove and bench area, and then right in the middle of all of it is a perfectly cooked fried egg. I'm just interested to know if they were able to save those cassette tapes, because losing that Escape from Germany tape must be devastating. Once, while I was in college, there was this cute girl I asked to talk to. On the day results came in, I saw her sitting crying. She failed her papers and would probably be sent back. I went and checked the results. It seemed that she had passed. I ran back to her with the good news. She was very happy. We went back to check the results together. To my horror, I realized I had made a mistake earlier and she had really failed. I was speechless when she boarded the bus in tears. This story is interesting because not all damage needs to be monetary.
While in college, I spent several summers working in a salmon cannery in Alaska, and for a few seasons, worked on the overnight cleaning crew. These huge industrial revolution looking behemoths that cut salmon into pieces and put them in cans. The final stage of cleaning these involved climbing into the cavity under the machine where the blade assemblies normally sat. It was removed nightly for sharpening. We used thin wire picks about 12 inches long to get any last fish parts out of the machine. Inside the cavity was a big drive arm that drove the part of the machine that fed the fish to the blades. This arm sat right across your chest as you worked in the cavity, and made for a handy shelf if you needed to set down your pick for a minute. Of course, one day I left my pick on the drive arm. The line mechanic came in and installed the blade assembly, which consisted of about 16 circular blades about 3 times the diameter of a basketball, and which rotated at a ridiculously high RPM as the machine ran. So the mechanic turns on the machine only to hear a god-awful screeching sound as the pick was fed into the blades. It wiped out about half of the blades on the assembly, and with no suitable backup, I took out a quarter of the plant's production capacity for the day. And this was a plant that processed 1 million pounds of very perishable fish per day. The head mechanic who heroically got this thing repaired by the next day pitched me a lot of crap, but never ratted me out. Homemade bomb when I was 9 years old. This all happened with my grandparents' black powder that he used to refill his shotgun shells, a battery-powered clock, a drilled-out light bulb, also battery-powered with a short fuse that attached to an element and duct taped to a 3-foot-wide oak tree. Huge explosion destroying the tree and setting fire to the field behind a nursing home. Tried to put out the fire with my jacket, which resulted in me fanning the flame. State police, helicopters, and fire trucks arrived at the scene. My grandfather smelt the fire on my clothes and dragged my butt out there to fess up to what had happened. Ain't doing that crap again. Lesson freaking learned. Excuse me? Did he not get in trouble? I mean, this kid made a bomb. I know we go pretty easy on children, but I think we should probably keep our eye on some. Not me, but 3 kids went up a hill near where I lived and decided to play with fire. They ended up burning down 40 houses, including mine. Most of the houses were leveled to the ground with nothing left but ashes. The evacuation was quick and many people lost pets and dozens of cars, and other vehicles that were also torched. My neighbors were about 12 Mexicans living in one house, and they didn't believe in banks and lost all of their money, about $7,000. That was in a jar in their basement. It wasn't a rich neighborhood, but many people didn't have insurance, so people became homeless. The kids in question came from a rich neighborhood and from which I hear had no remorse whatsoever. Neither them nor their parents had to pay a single penny. Kids didn't even get a slap on the wrist from what I heard. I was just a kid and my family had to live in a car for a few days before the Red Cross came and helped us with the motel for a couple of months before we could find another place to live. It wasn't a huge town, and with 40 families looking for a place to live, it took a while to find a place. If you're ever looking to give money, the Red Cross is always a good place to give. That and community action. Rich spoiled kids not having any remorse for people that make less money than their families? Color me shocked. I almost choked a family friend to death when I was a kid. We were playing around, wrestling and roughhousing, and I locked my arms around his neck pretending to put him in a sleeper hold. I thought he was just acting when he went all limp, so I just kept clinging on his back with my arm across his throat. I had no idea that I actually choked him unconscious. Only my mom freaking the freak out alerted me to the fact that no, he wasn't pretending, and yes, he was unconscious. I'm sure he lost a few brain cells because of me. And people say wrestling is fake. A friend and I accidentally set a park on fire, which spread to an elementary school and a forest. We were too freaked out to call 911 and ended up doing a tremendous amount of damage. A colleague pushed out the wrong image update to every desktop and computer at Merrill Lynch, taking every single one out for the span of 2 to 3 days. He was fired and sued. I think the company's insurance policy was hit really hard. Conversely, one day while I was at uni, I was wasted and on a midnight snack run to the 24/7 BP service station down the road. I was wandering past a playground and noticed some flickering light in the bank underneath the play equipment. I ran over to take a look, and there were these lines of fire all throughout the park, like somebody had sprayed a kind of accelerant so that it covered a fair amount of it and then lit. I ran around and kicked the dirt all over the fire and put it out, preventing what could have been a tremendous amount of damage. In retrospect, I probably should have called the fire department afterwards in case there was something smoldering, but I was pretty wasted and paranoid. When I was a kid, I went to my cousin's house one weekend. We were playing outside when a neighborhood kid approached us, telling us that the trailer park in the adjacent property was being thrown away by the owners and that we could do whatever we wanted to. After realizing that it was locked, we proceeded to find whatever we could, hammers, crowbars, etc., to smash the locks and get inside. After multiple futile attempts to smash the locks, we started trying to find our way in by ripping giant holes in the door. We ended up screwing this trailer up pretty badly before my aunt came outside in a storming rage and stopped us. After being caught and questioned, the kid that convinced us to do it claimed that he was only doing what he was told and that he had no idea what was going on. It was his parents' trailer. This story unlocked a memory of mine. I was at a friend's house and we were trying to play soccer. Well, he was the goalie and I was trying to score. Well, turns out he wasn't a very good goalie because I probably kicked the best soccer kick of my life and it went directly into his back door, leaving a huge dent in one of the panels. I feared for my life after that, and it was safe to say that any dreams of becoming a soccer star were crushed that day. A friend of mine lived across the street from a courthouse. One night we went on the roof and started launching bananas at the courthouse with a water balloon launcher. They were all landing on the courthouse steps. Then, the most glorious shot I've ever seen. It started out as a normal shot, but it was at the halfway mark, the banana hit an updraft or something, but instead of going down, it went up. And when I say up, I mean up to the glass dome. High velocity bananas plus glass domes don't mix. The banana shattered a glass panel of the dome. All those years of shenanigans, that was the greatest. Back when I was a dumb kid living in Italy, a bunch of friends and I decided to play hide and go seek inside one of the empty villas in our parco. Since the front door was locked and there were bars on the windows, we decided to break a hole in the side of the wall. Once inside, we discovered that laborers who worked for the landlord kept their power tools in there. We went full crazy and completely destroyed everything in that house. One of us came up with the idea if we hit a big water tank outside with the pickaxe, it would explode. After being disappointed by cracking the tank in half with no explosion, we decided the only way we could cause an explosion was to pour gasoline all over the furnace. Before we had a chance to throw the sparkling stick at it, the SPs and carabinieri showed up to ruin our fun. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Link at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.